to be here with you again. Welcome to day 2, what I'm calling the messy middle. That's the fun part, right? I am Kimmy Hunter, and I am your co-facilitator today. You'll be hearing a lot more from me. Our city council and city staff members, we want to welcome our live audience and community members who are chiming in today to be here with us. And let's get started. So I also want to just acknowledge one team, Nicholas Beeman and Kelly, remind me how to say your last name? Kennel, Kelly Kennel. So it's going to be an awesome day. Why? Because you brought so much to the space yesterday. And so I got up extra early this morning to rework the program that I had started to design to really harvest what you had said. And we're going to pretty much work through all the things you talked about in a precise, messy format. So I'm calling it the messy middle because, I was thinking about this trip I took with my 2 girls. They're the children, the dreamers. Their great-grandparents have the opportunity of looking back over time and reflecting. And then the parents were the messy middle of doing all the work between the dreaming and the ability to reflect and look back, right? So the great-grandparents were having a ton of fun. The kids were dreaming about what was next. And my partner and I were doing all the heavy lifting of what was called Disney World. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And so it's not that this is an amusement park or a city is one, but the idea here is the work that we're all doing, not me, just the facilitation part, but the work that you do every day and bring to our community and the community brings to you is that messy middle. It's not the youth and the young dreamer perspective only. It's not the advantage point of being able to reflect back and say, I've learned this, this, and this, and this, and I'm at peace with whatever. It's that middle part, which is the grunt work, which is expressed ambition. It's trying to get it right, all encompassing many, many factors in people. So the idea today is to produce policies that deliver community/public benefit, right? So that's the work of today. How far we get, I hope we get through the whole thing. I didn't do a lot of slides, so we could do the work and just really dig in together. So before I move to the next slide, I wanted to ask and just go person to person, open up with you. If you're eating, feel free to pass. We can come back to you. I know one of the things I noticed yesterday is several of you like to really think about what you're thinking about before you dive in. So before you speak, I'd like to offer, what are you coming in today with? I know we asked you at the end of the day, but today's a new day. What are you coming in with today that's like, man, if we could nail this thing, this was a total win, and we can take it from here. So just take about 30 seconds to 60 seconds to write that down. Because I'm going to hold that for you with the other things you said, and we're going to proceed together today. I'll be sitting most of the day, but thank you for all of this. It's very nice. There we go. Did it skip 2 or 1? There we go. Okay, who would like to jump in? It's that early morning, like,
I'll go.
Yay.
I don't think that by the end of today we're going to have formed a team. I think that would be, but I guess what I'd like to see is like a commitment in staying in the space of forming a great team.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Deborah, I saw you move the mic.
So I would say a little bit more clarity on priorities, direction for staff.
This is Kim. I'll just lift up that I shared Deborah's view.
Yeah, this is Richard. I was going to chime in on that as well, kind of, where we're headed. What's our next step?
This is Sage. I have a similar, I said if we could come together on a plan or a series of priorities and together I'll get behind them.
That's a big statement. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in?
Mine kind of encompasses everybody else. This is Antoinette.
Thanks.
It's, the word I'd written down was cohesion, but it's really important to me that we consider equity in every decision. So as Sage said, she'd come along. Whatever we decide, my question is always going to be, how does it affect the least, the less, and the lost in our community?
Thank you. Anyone else want to leave space for all? Hey, Brad.
Hey, I think it would be really beneficial if we came out of this not with everything fully delineated, but a roadmap of communication. What's that going to look like? How are we going to agree to agree?
And one last one, if anyone. Okay, well, the good news is what I've heard from you so far is actually what we'll be doing today. So I think I heard it enough yesterday that is the road. We've developed a roadmap. This is your roadmap, so you'll be designing it and driving it along the way. My job is just to support you in getting there. So priorities, which is city council's work, right? Setting priorities, plus the process, which is part of the communication we talked about, that is a shared model between council and staff, equals progress, representing all people. I heard that loud and clear yesterday. We're leaving no one out, we're leaving no one behind. We're going to move forward because we understand everyone in the community is represented. And with that being said, let's see if I can get this to work right. Here we go. So I totally did not create this. So the origin is left at the bottom. So for those of you who will receive the slide afterward, it'll be made public. The idea is this represents a lot of what you said yesterday, right? Thriving communities. It represents.
So we don't have a, we have you.
Oh, hi.
But there you go.
I want you. I do that a lot, so if it bothers you, let me know. Show me the way. Okay, let me go back. Oh, we were there. This can be one of those days, isn't it? I'm on the right screen here. So, I'm a little bit old school. When the tech goes away, Mama turns things around. Yeah, just turn it around so everybody can see. Thank you. So the idea here, again, I didn't create it, and I'm also not one to hijack, so the credit is at the bottom. But this really was something that I thought could very well represent a lot of what not only the...
I think
Yeah.
they're,
Absolutely. I will.
What did you want me to say? Good morning. Is that what you said? There you go. Good morning, everyone. Okay,
There you go.
Let me see here. I feel like a million things have happened since we started this yesterday morning, but I definitely feel, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like any anxiousness or kind of like, what's this going to be like? All that's gone away, and for me, anyway. It may also have something to do with the fact that my 8th grader got to go back to school in person for the first time in a year today. Yay! So that's kind of nice. But anyway, So I'm looking forward to today. I think we're about to get a bunch done.
About to get a bunch done,
We're
Will said.
about to get a bunch done, but maybe not from a technology standpoint, but, in terms of working.
Thank you.
So now we'll sing a tune or something. Did you guys want to? I was thinking about what I'm hoping to get accomplished today. How did you put it? You said, nail this thing. If we were to nail this thing. And it kind of made me think about one of the things that drive me crazy about retreats, although I did say yesterday I love retreats, so on balance, I do love retreats. But one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of what happens is brainstorming and spitballing, and staff is very eager to capture all of our brainstorming and spitballing. And sometimes I think we inadvertently get things on the list that when we look back on it, we go, now what, why, why was that thing on the list? And it wasn't, and we didn't stop and say, you know what, is there consensus around that thing we're putting on the list? Or was that one person's one-off thought that was sort of interesting, but really shouldn't have made the priority list? So I think everyone just needs to kind of have an awareness about that tendency for that to happen in retreats, and that we kind of check ourselves as we go along, like, okay, is that really something everybody wants to get behind? Is that something we want to really direct staff to focus on this year? Because every little thing we say, every idea, every brilliant nugget, behind it is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of staff time. So we just have to kind of remember that as we go along in this process. And that may be fine, but maybe sometimes it can be a little bit head scratchy in about 3 months.
If we're still stalled, I'd like to chime in on this conversation.
Yes, please.
I was thinking a little bit about this last night also, Esther, and yesterday I mentioned whether or not some of us had worked on private boards, but I also wondered if some of us have worked for a board. And I have, and I know that as a staff person for a board, it can be very challenging to have constant rotation of board members, constant change of priorities. And I just wanted to share that because I'm always thinking about this team as more than the 7 people here, as also our 3 employees. But I look around this room, there's dozens of people here working. And so I want us to consider that when our true team is the people that have to do the work after we turn these microphones off. And I was just kind of layering that into my perspective, like how can we do what is also very respectful of staff who have to do the hard work of what we come together on today. And I just wanted to share that because it stuck with me yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else want to add to the nail it piece? Any city staff members? If we just nailed this one thing. Don't want to call anyone out, just want to offer while we're working out the tech. Boom, boom. I'm doing my best. Ooh. There we go. Now you get to see the pretty picture. Okay. Before I keep talking, I just want to acknowledge I did ask, was there anyone else? Okay. So, as I mentioned, this wasn't something I harvested specifically from your conversation yesterday, but I went searching for something that could represent what was named in the room, and not just the 8 kind of buckets of categories of priorities, but the total 13. So thriving communities, belonging, these are the things that you're committed to. The structures that support the people, leadership, the wisdom, that was brought up several times yesterday. And so I just wanted to say visually, there's a roadmap, to your point, Esther, that we're looking to create today together. So it's, this is the easy part, the intro, what you gathered from yesterday, what you slept on overnight. And now, get your pen and pads out. Hopefully you've had enough time to think. It's time to dig into the work. So here we go. Oh, let's try this. All right, so I asked you to name your number of priority if you nailed it. But this little container represents you, the work you do in the community, what you bring, your perspective to the table as a council and also as staff in the room. I'm asking you, because we're going to go through a process, to name the one priority, because we started it yesterday, but we did not finish. So I think we got to Gwen, we got to Sandra. Oh, I can't remember everybody. You saw the list last night. But some of the things that were named are over here. And I just want you all to finish this on your own piece of paper. So we can talk about it out loud in a minute, but we're going to use progression to show you how the one thing builds into the bigger thing, which then needs to be deduced into more strategic doing. So put your little bucket down on your piece of paper. Say, this is the one thing. That's my one priority I'm bringing to our collective priorities today. My priority that I'm bringing to our collective priorities today, because we're going to incorporate debate. We're going to incorporate all the things to see where we land. We're going to do this exercise several times. So this is the beginning. We're going to do a dry run through. It's going to get real messy. Maybe you don't know exactly what we're doing, but by the fourth time we do it, from beginning to end, you're going to be so good at this. And you're going to put your own stank on it, right? Your own spin, your own personal desire of how you want that to roll out amongst the council. Some of you are still writing.
Kimmy, can I ask a question? This is Kim.
Please.
When you say number one priority, I have a list of priorities here. Are you sticking to that, or like a personal priority for a team priority?
I say right now, Kim, however you want to define it, because the pattern Olive will use to work through it, we'll get to like all the things. So whatever feels most comfortable in the moment. I like it. Lots of writing. So, continue writing. There's a reason why I put a cylinder, a structure, a box of sorts in this one slide. It's because oftentimes when we come to a project, a purpose, passion, commitment, it's amorphous. It's like we're very clear about what the thing is, but there's no container for it yet. And the idea of bringing the one priority and Like landing in a container isn't about containing the priority as it lives in a big way. It's about defining it so that collectively momentum can happen. So I know that seems awkward, but we think about it this way. When I come to a new job or a new client or a new build for that matter, the idea is that people might have raw land and they're looking for something to be built. Well, that's just amorphous. It could go here, it could go there, it could go there, it could go there. At some point, we have to kind of say, well, where would the water go? And where does the septic go? And how does the land drain and grade? And what else is needed to actually make the structure work? And so over time, you realize this big amorphous opportunity, this big commitment to build actually gets whittled down to where the container can actually fit and actually do well and thrive. And so I didn't use a house because that's obvious, right? Like, who wants me to use a house? So I used this little bubble to give an idea of how this priority wants to look. So anybody want to share briefly, maybe 4 people, what that one priority? Yes, Sandra.
This is sort of a continuation of what I spoke of yesterday, dealing with clarity on pros and cons and presenting that information. That's not only for us as a group, but it's also for the community. I've noticed that a lot of the correspondence that receive from us, people in the community, that basically they're sort of asking the same questions. They sort of have that, they're not unclear, don't have enough information. And I think by actually presenting these ideas in that type of form on any issue, of why we made a decision. And that alleviate a lot of those emails that come in, because I've spoken to many of them, and then once I explain it to them, they're like, oh, okay, now I understand. So basically, by doing this and being proactive in not only doing this for us to get clarity, but also for the people in the community, what we've actually done is reduced a lot of the tension between council and the community. And the better relationship that we can have with the council and the community, and a better relationship we could have with ourselves, but it'd be easier for us to deal with some of these issues as they come up. And it gives us a better platform to do that. Because like I said, a lot of the issues that we're seeing, they cause an effect,
Yes.
And I just think that we should be proactive in giving this information to them. So therefore, that cut down a lot of emails. And I've also, like I said, I've spoken to many, many people, and basically it's just because they don't have enough information that they are all upset and they're all stressed out. But just explain it to them, transparency, and people are gracious if you actually take the time to talk to them.
I appreciate that. Anyone want to add to that before I give my hey penny?
This is something that I think has been a struggle. This is a struggle. So there's a tension in a city council structure with the staff the way we have it, because I'm not a strong mayor, so I don't have a staff, and I don't have a PR department, and I can't message everything, like the way Bill de Blasio does in New York City, or whatever the case may be. And neither do we, because the only people we can hire are, the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk. So over the years, though, the city has recognized that communication is key. And, we built out a department around communications that now does things like builds the website and provides information pages, issues press statements, and does things like that. But it's not, it has to be very objective. It can't have any political content. It can't have any positioning to it. So it's frustrating for a council member when you don't have the support to be able to do what you're talking about. Sort of like, so I guess my question would be, is it just like the raw facts, or is it here's why we made this decision, or what are you thinking about?
Well, first of all, what I would like to do is actually have it so it's sort of a living document, so it doesn't come from one or two people's perspective. So after we start this chart or whatever with the pros and cons or whatever, then everybody could chime in with the way they look at it from their perspective. Does that make sense on council? So what you've actually done, you've actually sort of grouped pros and cons from everyone in the council. So we've actually got this viewpoint, and basically we sort of merged that into, a more clarified process. Does that make sense? So that's before, when you have staff that does the pros and cons, when you all have a, decision to make or whatever, they give us, okay, this is what, this is the reason why, this, whatever. But that's coming from staff. If we actually could merge it where we're all able to chime in on that, then you're may have a different outlook from different people. So you've actually can merge those into a more, comprehensive document that we can share. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly. I mean, we can't do it ahead of a meeting because then we're deliberating outside of a publicly noticed meeting. We could do it after a meeting, but it would be voluntary. Some people don't want to state why or why not they supported something or didn't support something.
So you're saying?
Wait, turn your mic on.
I'm sort of confused. So we don't want to say what we supported and why?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people feel that there are some issues where they want to vote for it or they want to vote against it, but they don't want to explain why. If they do, they'll say it in the meeting, they'll say it.
I didn't realize that. And I'm being honest, it's because I think that anytime you make a decision on anything, you should be able to say why or why not. So I don't, to me, and I think that's important. I don't necessarily disagree. I'm full of opinions and I say them all the time, but not.
Well, I need more information from you, Sandra. Yeah. So what's your end goal? What is your overall goal?
Okay, my end goal is basically what I see that's happening in the community, also in council, is that people have questions and they're getting upset because they feel like people are not answering their questions. They're being ignored. And the thing is, and they have issues. So I'm saying that the more information that we could give them, like I said, with the pros and cons, this, they can look at it and sort of get an idea of why something happened a certain way. And when people have more information, then it tends to cause less friction. And I found that usually, like I tell people, if you don't have enough misinformation, not enough information, all those things cause tension. So what you want to do is try to alleviate as much as that as possible, because see, down the line, that's going to benefit you because you're not dealing with things that you wouldn't be dealing with had people understood. Does that make sense?
If I may,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I get it, and I kind of feel that there's a way that staff may be able to provide more information maybe earlier, but it also sounds to me that it's the personal calling for you to get more information so that you can message to people, your constituency, what information you think they need to hear, or what information you think they need to hear in order to resolve some of the friction. Is that what you're feeling?
Okay, say for instance.
Well, and just so you know, there's a place for this type of debate later on in the session. So I see you, Sandra. No, please finish. I see Sage. And then we're going to table it for just a moment because we actually have a place for doing this work and then debating it out on the priorities and where it belongs in the current priorities. So this is good. I'm actually excited that we're off to doing the work, and that's why it's called the messy middle. Sage, or did you want to finish, Sandra?
Oh.
What she was saying is that what I was, well, basically, I've lost my thought.
Okay. Well, when you remember, write it down, and we'll bring it back later on. Sage.
It may be late for this comment. All I was going to say is that this reminds me of two things. The staff reports that come with the item that we're reviewing, they're usually pretty extensive. To the mayor's point, they are not opinionated, they are information-based. But I also come back to our volunteer committees. So a lot of the work and the pros and the cons and the discussion are being dealt with by other members of the community that then come to us by way of recommendation. And yeah, so I think there is some format there. Whether or not it can be improved, that's a different discussion. But I did want to share, there's a lot of preparatory information, whether or not it's easily accessible by the general public. You may have to know how to navigate a site, an agenda, the links, use Google Docs. I mean, it is an extensive process to dig up the information, but I do feel like the information is often there.
That's great. Thank you for closing that part of the session out, and thank you, Sandra, for bringing it up, and for Shanika for actually asking the question to bring in perspective. That the perspective you asked for is the perspective that began to take place, which is what we'll shape later on. So,
Kimmy,
yeah.
so this is a great transition back to the priority setting. My reaction to this is you're in a dialogue not only amongst yourselves, but you're in a dialogue with this community. So what I hear as a possibility is as you make decisions, including the decisions you'll make today as it relates to priorities, to be able to logically communicate the why behind your decisions. There's what I'll call the emotional, I feel like the city should be doing more. That's an emotion. But then there's the level after level of complexity on how you all made a decision. So for you all to be really clear, pros and cons logically, here's why we decided to prioritize that versus this, and then be able to logically explain and continue the dialogue with the community, I think is really important. That way you can take whatever a particular part of the electorate is feeling and help them understand the logical reason why you made decisions. For example, one of the things that we're going to face later today is the reality, the logical reality that you're limited in how much you can do by your budget. That's just the logic of living in a limited resource world that you live in. But you have to logically be able to explain that. If you don't logically do that amongst yourselves and within the community, all they have left is the feel of it. And I think that's not a very productive dialogue. So I think it's certainly something we have to talk about later today is how do we go out to the community and explain logically the decisions we made today.
Yeah, especially about heartfelt matters and things that relate to people's everyday experiences and how they're living out their truth. So well said, everyone. All right, so we've taken that number one priority. Oh, do I have to wait till it goes back to the PowerPoint screen? Yes, so, there we go. And we're gonna now take the one thing that you wrote down, and together we're gonna work through review the 13 priorities. Because currently we have 8 focus areas and 13 priorities that were set before you. And somehow there has to be a reconciliation between the two. And I don't mean that just in a financial term. I mean that in a, okay, what are we doing here? So will you all take a moment, if you're not all 100% familiar, and I'll read them out loud just for all the folks who are listening, and you can get this online on the city's website. But the primary focus areas you can see are the equitable and diverse community, transportation accessibility, thriving local economy, connected and engaged community, well-planned and livable community, clean and healthy environment, quality affordable housing, financially resilient city. And then within some of those specific focus areas, there are additional goals. So the idea here is, are there any themes that you see in these 8 focus areas that might overlap? Hold on to what you said before. Let's go to the big picture. So we went micro, we're going to go macro, and we're going to begin to connect the dots. So if we look at these focus areas and goals, what themes and or overlaps are present for you personally? What do you see that's like, well, these kind of go together. I don't know why they're separate, why they couldn't integrate.
Again, Santoinette, I think an equitable and diverse community overlaps with everything.
equitable and diverse community overlaps with everything. Thank you.
I generally think of the term sustainability with multiple arms that could encompass a couple of these. I think of sustainability fiscally, environmentally, and socially. So you could say a clean and healthy environment and a financially resilient city are both measures of sustainability.
Okay. Kelly, I might have to ask you to, because I'm not writing it down right now.
I'm sorry, I was suggesting that two could be joined under said term, sustainability.
I'm sorry,
I'm looking at this.
where's sustainability?
It's not. I'm saying
Okay,
sustainability could
you can't
encompass.
combine something that's not yet on the list with something.
Well, I was just saying that financially resilient and a clean and healthy environment could be
Oh,
combined
you would
under
call
the
it a new
idea
thing. You would call it a new thing called sustainability and fold those together?
fiscal, environmental, and social sustainability. It's just, yeah, perspective.
What, I'm still looking for, what, she was saying what two would you combine? I'm sorry, I'm
It's
like
okay.
totally, I'm not
It's,
understanding you.
it's early. I was just saying, I see a clean and healthy environment, and I see a financially resilient city.
Yes,
And I'm thinking that two of those could possibly be encompassed under the idea of fiscal, social, and environmental sustainability.
And, sorry, Kimmy, you took away the, somebody took away the thing.
They're asking for the screen back. Thank you.
So I'm capturing the one that Antoinette said, which is the first one.
Yes.
Equitable and diverse community could go under all. And I'm going to move to Sage's.
Yeah.
Sage,
thank you.
are you combining it under financially resilient city?
So this is how I want to look at yours. So I'm going to give you all an example. And
Sorry.
this is just my example. No apologies, no sorries. That's a group rule I have with a group of girlfriends. So, so the idea here is think about a unicycle, a bicycle, and a tricycle. A unicycle has the opportunity to go, but it's powered by one person, and it has an opportunity to fall because it's not quite stabilized yet. A bicycle also has the capacity to fall, but there's a little bit more stability because there's a balance in place. And a tricycle can oftentimes accommodate, people want to go slower, or it just has this other factor to it that keeps it even more grounded. So the idea of looking at these priorities is to say, what kind of is on its own? It's kind of its own thing. Maybe it's standalone, maybe it goes with other things, I'm not sure. And again, there's no right or wrong, because part of this process is like figuring it out. These two things, they're just nailing it. I just don't see them being separate. And I'm not trying to hem you into a box. The idea is to think about the priorities and if any of them already fit. And then the third would be these three kind of create a triad and just seem like without this one, it doesn't really function well together. So does that support the thinking without creating a new category? So that's the key glitch I'm going to offer for this moment, because we're going to go through this exercise many times. And it's your exercise to take with you and do more with it, but I'd like you to trust me to go through it this way first.
This is Kim, using your analogy of the tricycle, and what I'm hearing Antoinette saying is that instead of equitable and diverse community being a separate thing in a wheel, that it needs to be the guiding principle, so like the front wheel. And so everything else that we loop behind it would follow that guiding principle if we really meant it. But it isn't good, it's not enough to put it in a back wheel. But that's how I see it.
Super clear. I love that clarity.
And I further on that, if I had to pick one and couldn't include diverse community, I would do affordable housing. But I wouldn't want to do anything on affordable housing if it weren't equitably considered. In other words, I'd rather not build a building than build one that doesn't benefit the most vulnerable in that area.
Understood, thank you.
This is Kim. I would say because it's my responsibility to say it, that transportation is at the intersection of equitable access, environmental responsibility, and economic mobility. So when you have transportation, financial resiliency, a clean, healthy environment, it impacts affordability of housing, whether or not you can get to it and your job and your kids to school or childcare. We should be planning around that. It will help us to thrive, and it will connect people. So it kind of, if in my mind, it hits all of our goals, but because we treat it as a separate thing, it makes it really hard for us to even get our top #1 priority done.
I want to take a pulse in the room. That was a lot that was just said between the two of you, and I just want to stop for a second and check in. Are you? Nope. Okay. Check in with what, Esther, you're red.
Oh, I just,
Want to check in with what you heard Antoinette and Kim say. Check in with, yes, Gwen.
I think what I heard Antoinette say is an equitable and diverse community is a value. It's not a, and it has to steer all the other goals and priorities.
yeah, to the tricycle analogy, I thought it was more like a layer, like it would be layered over the top of the whole chart, not, or maybe, I don't know what analogy is, right? And I don't know what the visual, I know every year we do this, the staff struggles to come up with like a visual that reflects what we said in this retreat. So I don't know exactly if apparently we're about to go for a tricycle.
Well, I may
Jamie.
be messing it up even
But-
more, so you can blame me for it. Nobody else, this was all my idea.
And
Blame me.
Kimmy, can I piggyback off what you just said? So a value is not what I meant to impart. What I meant to say was it is a requirement.
Heard. So that value was heard. Requirement is what you are saying, so that clarification's good. So, and then Esther, I heard you're not so keen on the analogy, so that's okay. That's not bad. But you were saying that it's more like a layer and not necessarily one of the wheels. Is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm understanding it, and what I'm doing in my mind every time I hear these abstract concepts is applying it to something. Okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to do kind of an equity audit of every, how does it get implemented? How does that look? Does it mean would we have done the Charlotte Street Road Diet, because that's a primarily white neighborhood? How does it work?
Well, okay, so that gets me back to the discussion we were having yesterday about the difference between reparations and equity.
Power isn't born, it's built over time.
So equity isn't just Black people, right? I think that's what people hear. So, when we get the wonderful explanations, when we get our packets for everything, they'll say, this is what priority it goes to. For me, if I don't see an equity discussion, my eyes roll to the back of my head, right? So, Charlotte, first of all, the question is, why aren't there Black people in that area? But, it is what it is. But then who benefits, who doesn't? That's what I'm saying. So it could be people who don't have cars, right? So that's an equitable way of handling. Sometimes people want to bike because that's what they like to do, but other times people need to do it. So I would like to know those for whom it is their required form of transportation. I want to know how that affects those people. how many are being affected by it.
So that, I think what it could look like is, I've mentioned this in the council meeting before, in our staff reports, we see like, what are the financial impacts? If we want to really operationalize this so we can go back and look at the outcomes, then it could look like an equity impact and a sustainability impact. Not that we're going to get it right every time, but when we start documenting it and then go back and do an equity audit, we can look and see like, how did this get us to our goals? And then it operationalizes it so we always have that conversation.
And I think that would help us in the long run when people go, what are you doing about equity? And then you literally have the data.
So I think the conversation as I'm hearing it is, I think sequence matters. I think the conversation around how do we know if we're making progress, how do we measure, is going to be real important. And there is a certain point in the sequence of things where that's going to be all you talk about. Where we are this morning is trying to figure out from these 8 components of the vision, chunking them into likeness. In other words, seeing the logical connection points within the 8 as a measure, as a way of chunking, as a first step in prioritizing what you decide to go deep with as an investment, a focus, what you decide to take your resources deeply into. What of these are operationalized to a sufficient degree where we can now take resources and go deeper on ones that have not been developed very much. So if you keep going through the logical exercise of asking yourself for these 8, which ones are linked logically? For example, thriving local economy, in my mind, seems to be directly linked with a financially resilient city. It's hard to have a financially resilient city if you don't have a thriving local economy. So that's a chunking. So I would offer as part of the sequence that we see if we can find the logical connections between the 8 and work our way through that. And then we'll move to layering in your individual priorities that you bring to the table this year. And then what does that look like tactically?
Thank you, Nicholas. And I also want to add to what Nicholas said. I want to honor that I do think you're doing that by asking some of the questions you're asking. Esther, I heard you very clearly use the word abstract, right? And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. Perhaps the first question to be able to chunk them together is, are there any priorities that you see here that are just too abstract? That whether you're getting the staff reports or other things, which goes to your point, Sandra, of having more knowledge and information and decentralized knowledge, like is there anything just too abstract that you're not sure how you're measuring or how you're prioritizing? Because before you can chunk, maybe that's the first question. Maybe something's too abstract about the columns themselves, and we need to unpack that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I want to chime in there, particularly around equity, because that's where I was getting lost, because equity can be a value, it's abstract, those kind of things. But the phrase is equitable and diverse community. And if you look at the goal, it talks about the school system.
Yes.
So I was trying in my mind to figure out how are we defining an equitable and diverse community? Because to me, that could fit easily with well-planned and livable community, because that also could be an equitable community. So I guess what outcome are we trying to get to is what I was trying to figure out in that conversation.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that you amplified that.
So if we're trying to look at one that's really abstract on this list, is that the request?
Well, I'm asking if anybody sees any of them as abstract, because you're like, when it comes to doing the work, you're like, where are we measuring, adding this in? I don't see it. Because this is part of creating the priorities and how you want to see things move forward through the process that city staff will put together.
In that case, I would say that I think the reason why clean and healthy environment ranked so low in the past is it's really hard for us to do something about something that isn't just us. The things that are happening on this planet have an impact on our stormwater, for example. So it's hard for us to just constantly be in response mode on something that it's being impacted by human actions, but not something that we can fix by ourselves. So it's hard to have tangible or measurable goals around it other than our reaction.
I appreciate you saying that. And then, so the goal around a clean and healthy environment is promote environmental stewardship, which specifically ties to reducing municipal carbon footprint by 4% each year. So you're saying that theme there is still a little too abstract to know how to chunk it, where it goes, or even how to prioritize it. Am I hearing that correctly or not so much?
Yeah, and we're just not like meeting our emergency goals. Like we have a stated climate emergency, but what that goal is not enough. So I think the problem is that we've siloed it out. And that's why I'm saying we might need to operationalize it with a sustainability impact. That way in every single department and everything we do, we're just kind of like making sure we checked in. Not that some office over there should maybe look at it or the public asking if an office looked at it. I hear that a lot from the public. Did the Office of Equity and Inclusion look at this? Did sustainability look at this? And are we all looking at this? Might help us think about that one in a different way, because right now it seems to me to be really abstract. And that's maybe why we're not meeting our goals.
No, that's great. So I'm actually hearing two now, not in terms of it too abstract, but equitable and diverse community as well as clean and healthy environment. That at least what I'm hearing in the room is those need to be evaluated regularly. Am I hearing correctly? Like no matter what we're looking at, these aren't siloed. So it's not necessarily chunking them into another particular group, but you're saying like something's missing from being able to evaluate it along the way. Is that just one person? Do I hear?
I hear that. This is Sage. I hear that as well. And similar to the way we talked about staff reports and including an equity kind of point or discussion in their evaluation, I think environment, to Kim's point, is the same. It's did we use that lens? Did we put all of these lenses on it and evaluate?
And that sustainability efforts have to have an equity lens. Like they're not separate, because we know the most impacted members of our community will be impacted by the impacts of climate change. So if we're gonna do it, we have to have an equity analysis at the same time.
Anyone going in a different direction? Feeling complete about this?
I have a couple. So I'm just working my way through the logic map.
Uh-huh.
So part of what I'm hearing is if you're to have a well-planned and livable community, top right, a well-planned and livable community, that community also has to be equitable and diverse, top left. So top left and top right feel very integrated to me. If you're to have a well-planned and livable community, that's a community that has to be clean and healthy. Would you say that's fair? Part of a well-planned community here is it's clean and healthy. So that to me feels very connected to top right. Clean and healthy feels very connected to, that has to be part of how we plan our livable city well. And a well-planned and livable community for all has to have affordable quality housing. So those first three on the right feel very connected to top left, equitable, diverse community. So those four, to me, feel like they live together. Equitable, diverse community is part of being well-planned and livable. Clean and healthy, part of being well-planned and livable. Quality and affordable housing for all feel like well-planned and livable. Though, in my logic, those all feel very connected. What's your reaction to that?
My sentiments exactly. I was, yeah, I'm in total agreement. I was actually planning out that same scenario, but not as well as he explained it.
I am concerned, though, that now equity, clean and healthy environment live under well-planned and livable, when really if it's an equitable and diverse community is at the heart of what we do and our goals, then it will be well-planned and clean and healthy for everybody, not just the most resourced people.
That's very, very good. So the chunking, the logical correlation, connection between the vision themes, my suggestion is which one's at the top, we sort that out secondly. We first want to see logically which ones are connected. Because, for example, ultimately, if you chunk them, the lead headline might be, in an attempt to make sure that we have an equitable and diverse community, we've got to plan it well, it's got to be clean and healthy, it's got to be livable, and it has to include affordable, quality affordable housing for all. So my gentle nudge is to be less interested at this point in the sequence of what it's called or what's the lead theme, but to see the logic in the connection. In fact, this, in my mind, this exercise is not about the elimination of any of them or the re-ranking the order at all. It's where is the logical connection of the vision themes. So I think you're exactly right, Kim. You don't want to, by this chunking, we're not saying, hey, is something going to get lost? Not at all. In fact, it may get elevated by this chunking process. And just as a reminder, the reason why this is so important is because you've got decisions to make. And budgetary decisions to make on where you invest limited resources. So the logical connection, you may be able to actually deliver better results if you're trying to focus on 4 chunkings as opposed to 8 vision themes. That's one of the outcomes of the conversation.
Thank you. Hi, Antoinette.
And so with that in mind, Nicholas, I would chunk or connect thriving local economy and financially resilient city.
Agreed. Does make sense to go together.
Did you get that, Kathy? Thank you, Kathy, for doing this.
I wanted to chunk something, but I wanted to use thriving local economy, but I wanted to chunk it with diverse and equitable community, because if we don't make sure people thrive, then we can't achieve an equitable community. Because, I mean, what's the reality? Most Black people, most people who are disadvantaged in some way, especially economically, can't afford to live here. So we're having a well-planned and livable community for who? And if you don't have a nice base income, then affordability, we know we can't go deep in affordability, just by the landscape. So we're making it affordable for groups of people who, might not even be able to afford what we have, what we call affordable. So to me, the thriving local economy is also one of the drivers.
Mm-hmm.
That to me feels very logical. Is for everything you're trying to create for this community, most of it has to have an economic engine to it. I mean, we're all faced with the reality that everything you're proposing, there is a financial reality to it. And when you have a thriving local economy, it doesn't really help you if people here are spending dollars in other communities. But when you have a thriving local community, that's jobs, that's entrepreneurial opportunities. And if that base of local, your point, the thriving local economy, that is going to help create a more equitable and diverse community. In other words, it'll even draw people in. People move for economic vitality, they move for jobs. So if you can create that as an engine, boy, will it help everything else. That to me, Shanika, that feels very logical to me. I get that.
Thank you. Sage.
I may just be more of a linear type thinker in this environment, but I just wanted to kind of point out the well-planned and livable community. We could probably draw lines back and forth through all these. They're all going to be interconnected, but when I look at this, I see these 8 points. When I look at the document in front of us, there are goals with it.
Yes.
And I just wanted to highlight, in this case, on this document, the well-planned community is really about the UDO, the comprehensive plan, the documents that we create to live by. And I just didn't want that to be lost in translation here.
Thank you, Sage. Yeah, we're going out a little bit, the macro, but yes, these micro and subcomponents are critical to upholding like what actually sticks, what stays sticky. So then that leaves transportation and accessibility and connected and engaged community. So do you see a correlation between those two? Do you see them as separate?
Accessibility and connected and engaged community. You know, when you see transportation and accessibility together, you think, you know, access to transit, access to sidewalks, but I also think a connected and engaged community has access to information, to Sandra's earlier point.
Excellent. Anyone want to add to that? Say here to that?
I also want to connect transportation to a thriving local economy. I think people's access to transportation kind of helps them, their economics. And accessibility to different areas. I don't know, to me, those two live together along with a connected and engaged community.
Kim?
And also, with affordable housing, we keep building affordable housing where it's the cheapest to build it, which a lot of times has the least amount of access. So when I think, though, about the connected and engaged community, we've learned so many lessons this year that it would be really unfortunate if we toss them in the bin at the end of the day. And we're at that moment now, right? A lot of things are coming back to being in person, but we've been able to hear people's voices that, you know, if I can be making dinner for my family and also listening to the council meeting and also call in with a public comment without having to get a sitter or have to pay a taxi because I don't have a car and the bus doesn't run past 7:30, then we can resource our people, which is one of our most valuable resources. So I think that it shouldn't get tossed, that we've learned a lot about increasing accessibility, boards and commissions, and public engagement. We've gained a lot of skills.
Yeah, I hear you, and there's no intention here to toss anything. It's really just about bringing the same things or things that actually have momentum to say, like, what belongs together now. And that it didn't have to be anything that belonged together, but the idea was that you would elevate and amplify, okay, these actually have some synergy together as opposed to being in these separate buckets. So,
Can I make one more connection? And I'll give an example from my hometown, Charlotte. Decisions that were made years ago have had a massive impact on Charlotte, on all of the areas that you all are talking about. Our airport, and that as a transportation hub, is vitally important to our city, both for people who live in the city, for them to be able to have transportation out to the airport, and transportation from the airport to wherever they're going, personally and for business. So for our business community in Charlotte, our airport is extremely important, transportation access. And in reverse, part of the reason why Charlotte has grown so much is that airport. People come through the airport and it's a hub, so they get introduced to our city by first visiting our airport. Decisions on conventions and sporting events are partly initiated or created because of the airport. That's the first example of what you're saying around the importance of transportation and having a diverse community, thriving economy, financially resilient city. The second example I would share with you from my hometown is our light rail. 20-something years ago, they made the decision to have light rail. It's expensive. The deals it took, the debate it took to have that ultimately become reality was a big deal. It completely revitalized an entire quadrant of the city that was mediocre to poor. There wasn't a lot of economic viability. It wasn't entertainment. It wasn't housing. They built that light rail, and it changed the city. And it was so successful in creating accessibility and an engaged community. There was excitement. People went there to live. People went there to work. People went there to eat and enjoy life. And it was so successful, they said, well, let's take it from the center of Charlotte and run it north of town. And right on cue, the same thing, that northern corridor, which is a corridor largely people of color and diverse, it's now coming back alive. Streetcars. I remember having a conversation with Anthony Fox when he was mayor. Anthony grew up in West Charlotte, and he was bound and determined that if we ran a streetcar through his neighborhood in West Charlotte, it would bring the community back. Sure enough, it's happening. So I think you're onto something with connecting access and transportation to the financial viability of the community. I think it's a big deal. It's logical to me. And I wanted to give you a couple of examples how we've seen that work, that logic work in Charlotte.
Thank you, Nicholas. Just to let the AV team know, I lost my monitor, so. Go to the next slide. Try the next. Yeah, I did, and I went blank. Thanks.
It's up there.
Not sure which one. It's the computer's slow like me. Not a bad pairing. Is that the exact next? Yeah, I need the. Thanks, Kathy. The one right after. There we go. So, you've identified the themes and the priority overlap. You've amplified likeness, potential differences for now, distinctions, and started to converge the categories. So the next piece is, this is the fun part, right? Oh, just one time. Capacity and constraints. And Nicholas alluded to this earlier, right? So I'm not touching anything. There we go. Okay, it's not on here though. But so capacity and constraints, I will just get up. They're not matching. What must keep going because it's operationalized? And I think, Kim, you alluded to that earlier, right? So we're pulling these things together. The idea here is that maybe if you look at your sheets with the priorities, maybe there's an area that we haven't really gone deep in and nothing's been operationalized yet. So the opportunity for capacity can fill up. Maybe there's a couple of areas that we've pulled together that capacity is starting to fill, and we have maybe a quarter of that capacity in that bucket left, and of that priority. Another one might be just getting started, and another might be half full. So the idea in this part of the exercise is to actually begin to say, okay, if we're collaborating and condensing and converging these categories, what has been operationalized? This is where we start looking at the idea of the budget. What is actually moving? We have people, staff behind it. This is how we make revenue as a city. This is where things go. And how much capacity remains for us to put more of this priority at the forefront? What questions do you have about what I just said? I see a lot of.
For me, if you could just walk me through, like, well, just give me an example, but like
Sure.
really use departments or use a.
Sure.
Because I didn't get what you just asked.
Sure. So let's use clean and healthy environment, since that was brought up before, right? Currently, in terms of what was accomplished in 2020, how many resources were put in from the staff, the budget, how that's being captured to reduce municipal carbon footprint. Richard, I think you covered some of that yesterday, did you? Right, so if you wouldn't mind supporting me on the numbers, that would be really helpful. And we're actually putting that, will you flip that back so we can see what categories we put that with?
Are you saying to refer to the presentation from yesterday that sort of described what's been accomplished under each of these buckets?
Yes, so this is
Priorities.
actually going to be an exercise where we're not going to mic for a while. We're going to get into teams at the table and start to review these things. So this isn't just an external verbal exercise. Thank you, Kathy. So to the point of the example that you asked for, Gwen, so if we're saying we've put these buckets together, we're saying a clean and healthy environment at the bottom, yeah. We are now saying that it correlates with equity, and equitable and diverse communities. And I think that's the only one we put it with. Do we put it with something else? The clean and healthy? Yes. We put it And that's where it's lived. That's where it's lived before by itself. Now we're merging it with equitable and diverse communities, and we're actually layering it into our processes. Where have those pieces already been operationalized in the city as a priority? Richard, do you know the answer to that? Budgetary spending and process and things of that nature? Not to put you on the spot. Allocated resources to it. So there's staff. Mm-hmm.
But then they're also doing work within departments around those various issues around equity, inclusion, and around sustainability.
Staff improvements.
Like we've installed solar panels on the transit station, for
I'm
example.
having a hard time hearing you. Will you pull the mic closer?
Yeah, for example, on sustainability, we've installed solar panels. We've done a joint RFP with the county. We've done those kinds of things where we've made investments around both of the topics.
Right, so investments have been made, whether they're human investments, financial investments, staff investments, collective investments, putting metrics together, things like that, investments have been made. So when we start to pull these resources together, these buckets together, and you start to look at it from an investment of like how much more room is there once we start to prioritize these to add more to this lane. Okay? This is where I'm going. You with me? Okay. When we start to look and pull the resources, is there any margin left over? Are we at zero? We haven't put enough investment in it. We've already overinvested in it. We haven't even touched the surface of it. Okay, same thing with a well-planned, livable community. And it might be easier to look at the goals and the strategies. It's really challenging to do this exercise if you're just looking at the focus area, right? But if we get into the goal of a clean and healthy environment to promote environmental and stewardship, whether that's through marketing, banners, website resources, having a department, some of that's been operationalized. When we go into the weeds of it, the strategy, there's been operationalization there as well. Reducing the municipal carbon footprint has meant today installing solar panels, adding key components, measuring for certain things. So when we add that to everything else, whether it's an overlay, whether it's just partnering it with equitable and diverse communities, we're going to start to put the idea of capacity with the priorities. That's the point of this exercise. Because I think it's okay to prioritize. I think that's what your work is. That's what you're here to do. At the same time, the outcomes that everybody's looking for in the room boils down to what can be done. Because the resources are there, because there's enough. We've thought through all the pieces that are missing, and we know that staff has a plan for it, and there's a budget for it, and all that. We're not going to do the budget today, of course. But the idea is to take the priorities, pull them together, and say, what more can we do with what we have right now in the measurable time frame with the measurable resources we have today? Thoughts?
One thought, because this is my first council retreat, so sorry if I'm off base, but when going into this process, I was thinking about how can I prepare and what are the outcomes I hope occur. And to me, we have some things going on above. Sorry, it's behind you. So I guess one of the things I said going into this is it would really help me to understand what it is that is still on the table unfinished before we say as a group or to staff, go do all these new things. And maybe that's what you're getting at here. Like, what is the capacity? How have we achieved these goals thus far? What is left to do? Do we have the capacity to do it? Are we layering on more? Or are we switching directions entirely? And I think for me, is that where you're going?
That is the point of this exercise and why we're going to do table work, not, huddle up work, but under table. and hopefully some staff can pepper in, because there's missing information. I think that was brought up several times yesterday, is I'd like to know more. How do I get more information to know what to prioritize and where to put my emphasis? And so that's this part of the exercise, is to say, now that we've identified a personal priority, we've looked at the existing priorities, we've pulled the priorities into what looks like categories that make sense. What's the capacity? What don't we know? What additional information is required so that we actually know how to move forward to the next steps? Because not everybody here already knows that. And that was one thing I really gathered from listening to you yesterday, is with 4 new council members, there's just a lot of knowledge that's not there yet. So we're going to knowledge build in this part to say, what else do I need to know before making a decision about this is the priority, right? Because that's what we came here to do, is to set priorities. It's really challenging to set priorities if you may not have enough information. So that's the point of this piece. So thanks, Sage, for saying it differently. And I just want to get anybody else's comment in the room before we go off mic and you guys do a little bit of table work just to kind of get out of your head, what else do you need to know? Gwen, you got a question, thought, comment?
You may have to come to our table
I
and
will.
walk us through it, because I'm
I will.
still a little, apparently I'm a little linear.
I'm reminded, thankfully, that food access is really going to be important to so many parts of our work. And we have made commitments with the Asheville-Buncombe Food Policy Council, but we may have to resource it more seriously if we want to end the food access disparities that we have.
Yeah, I think that's great, Kim, because, you know, there's real clear goals and strategies here, and many of you didn't make these specific goals and strategies, but as you start to look at the buckets and bring things together, you may say, what else don't I know about food? And, you know, looks like we touch on it a little bit, but not really. You know, you talk about working with the schools. That totally brings up food in every aspect in addition to education. So I appreciate that you're saying that. It's not going to live in the focus area, and it may not even live in the actual goal, but it could be something that city staff goes back, you know, by naming it and makes it part of the strategy. Who knows? But that's something to think about. Kathy, I can't thank you enough for doing that. Thank you so much. So we're going to take about 15 to 20 minutes at the table and get to work.
Could we take just a quick break?
Please, yeah, of
I
course.
mean, I'm just like 5 minutes. And then,
Absolutely.
And then, go ahead, say.
Can I ask one thing? And, you know, it's comfort level of council members, but is there any way we can shut some of the doors? I'm just, because I'm
Thank you.
really cold.
The temperature,
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm also very cold.
is everyone freezing?
And,
I have a heater, so I'm
But-
not freezing.
but I
Thank you,
mean, I
Sage.
think that
And
one of the
Kathy.
reasons, you know, we had the doors open as
I
much
think
as
someone just shut
is
that
we're
one. Jamie, did
okay.
you?
But I mean, if we're comfortable, if like we could kind of rethink every door being open. it
There's
would be
just
good
that
for
bay
me.
door and that bay door, so I don't know. I
Right.
think that one's closed.
I can only speak for myself, but I would feel more comfortable closing the doors if we were following mask guidelines.
Okay,
Well,
so
let's take a break.
Yeah, and Jamie stepped away, so I'll try to talk to her about.
Yeah.
Do you have the time? I don't know. Let me look. 9:50. Let's take 10 and be back at.
10.
Let's just be back at 10.
Okay.
And then we can get into the groups.
And then where do you want us just around?
I'd say just stay at your table, and then I'll just populate at each table and just make sure honest.
Okay.
I need somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to group up.
Yeah,
with you.
group
Okay.
up.
If we combine, I'll come over here with the linear.
Yeah.
I'm like, linear. I was texting you. I was like, I'm cold.
I'm sorry,
It's okay.
I had to go to the bathroom.
I know.
got this. I'm going to need your and Richard's help.
You need, can I do something?
Well, I'm going to need you all's help in clarifying some of this. When I start doing it, you'll see what I'm doing, but then I'm going to look at you all and say, when they say, I'm going to say, like, here's what we do.
All right, everyone. That was a fast 10 minutes. So we're already iterating to make sure that this work really lands for you. It's not about me. It's just about getting you to where you want to be. So would you like me to move it up a little bit more? I can come closer. Okay. So we had a little iterative powwow, and instead of doing the first one at your table, we'd like to do the first one together so you can see the process and how we're. Yeah, you're welcome. We're in it. So Kathy's going to join me because there's pieces of this that really live with city staff in the how. How do the priorities get delivered? So we're going to start with the first one that you connected. If you remember what you did over here was equitable and diverse communities with, I don't have my paper in front of me. Not good with abbreviations. I don't know about anybody else. I am not good with Thank you. With quality, affordable housing, with clean, healthy environment, and with well-planned and livable communities. So when we come over here, we're saying that this is a bucket. Remember when we went to the little cylindrical bucket? We're saying, okay, these were separate. Now we've converged them into one. And we're going to do the same with the goals and the strategies that are already in place. Okay? So, Kathy?
So the goals and the strategies are on your sheet, your one-pager sheet. So just,
Yes.
yeah.
So this isn't anything new. This is just about taking what is already known, pulling it together, saying where do these goals and strategies now come together, and what's missing. But how will you know to say what's missing until you potentially are reminded, or it's new information because so many of you are new, how that might have already been operationalized or how it's being handled, what specific things are being done. Maybe you don't remember. So that's part of this exercise as well. This is where city staff comes in to say, not only are these the strategies and the goals and how we're doing it, but is there any other information you need to know to decentralize the knowledge? And then what is still missing? Is this supportive? Do you want to walk through the exercise? Okay, Kathy.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things I hope that you keep in mind, thank you, Kimmy. We made some sausage, didn't we?
We did.
One of the things I hope you keep in mind as we walk through this, it's not perfect. I think yesterday Gwen said, you know, if we want to be like this is not going to be a perfect exercise, we're going to refine it and we're going to bring it back to you. So what we're trying to get at is how do we say we're doing all these things? And as Kimmy said, you know, you all told us these feel very much aligned underneath equity. And I think we heard some of you say that equity should be the core of all of them, but we're trying to pull them together. So what we did is to take the existing sheet that you have and say, which of these goals? So if you look at the sheet, you'll see the existing goals that we have.
In green for your legend purposes.
And then you'll see in black, and we haven't written all these out, but in black you'll see the strategy. So some of the questions we have for you during this process is, have we operationalized that strategy to the point that you no longer need to focus on it? Because we imagine that you're going to want to say, we want to do other things here. So we are looking to say, what can we take off of your plan because we're already doing it. It doesn't mean we're going to stop doing it. But what have we done to that point? So let's walk through this.
Yeah, I think that's important what you just said, and I want to amplify it. Kathy, as this is not about elimination. This is about being more concise, and more clear so that the trajectory and momentum that's already happening will continue to go. And whatever you're saying, like, hey, this is missing, we considered this, do we need to add, that gets funneled in, okay?
Yeah, so under the equitable and diverse community, just the goal of eliminate racial disparities in our school system. And there were two kind of ways of doing that. It was working with the school system, and the other one was working with small and minority businesses. So just as a quick reminder, we have been working with the school system. We are moving forward with developing the program with United Way. So those are some strategies that staff has used to be able to get to this goal. So the question, you don't have to answer it now, we're going to walk through it. Have we gotten to the point that you all feel like staff has operationalized that you no longer need to say, we need to do this because we've gotten to this point? Doesn't mean we won't do it. The other one is support and enhance small businesses. You know, we have developed our small business inclusion. I'm looking at Peggy and Deborah and Richard and Brad as staff to help me with this. We do have that program in place, but if you feel like there still needs to be more emphasis, which I would tell you I feel like I've heard from you all, then you may want to leave that one in place to say, what are the other ways we can support small businesses? The next one that we have in green, well, we have the small and minority businesses. The plans consist with the Living Asheville and the UDO. So under that category, you had two different things before, or the previous council had two different things. You wanted to look at corridor studies. So you saw that we're underway with the planning of 2 corridor studies right now. So you would ask yourself, do we want to do more corridor studies? Because we're already doing those 2 corridor studies. And then the other one is revising
the UDO.
Revising the UDO. So one way we did that was through the hotel changes. But you all may want to say, no, we need to overhaul the UDO more, and we need to focus that because, you know what, we need to spend some budget money on redoing the whole UDO. I'm funneling the mayor's voice as I'm saying this because we've heard this a lot.
And Sage.
I've heard a lot on affirmation. So you all may want to stay with that one. When you look at promote environmental stewardship, we have been doing that through reducing our carbon footprint by 4% every year. So the question would be, we've operationalized that. We have somebody in place now that goes through and looks for that 4% every year. Is that something you all want to keep on your policy goals, or is it something you're turning over to staff to say, you got this, keep doing it, thumbs up?
And I just want to stop for a second and emphasize what you just said. The goal here, like in the next 2 slides after we finish this exercise, you'll see is there's already things on the table for policy that have been in place and that are moving forward. What is good to go? You're like, it's not that it's perfect. We're not going to spend more time and resources on this right now because there are things in place. We need to see them out a little bit further, whatever the reason is. And we actually want to put more time, resources in these areas of policy making because we know it's going to carry these priorities further. So that is the ultimate next 2 steps. That's why this exercise is important so that you can get to those steps.
So, and I think it might be helpful to think of an example of something that's no longer on this list but is fully operationalized. We don't have to sit here every year and go over it again. I mean, lots of city services are not on this list. In fact, probably 90% of them are not on this list because they're fully operationalized and we just assume they will continue to happen. For example, building out the Greenway Master Plan continues to happen. So that's an example of something that's been operationalized, so it's not, a bullet point on this list anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and that's something that I cannot and am not capable, I don't have all the answers. I'm not capable of bringing that knowledge to the room, but there are people in the room who have that knowledge, and the idea is to decentralize the knowledge, which is often what you've been saying the last day and a half, of how do I get more understanding and knowledge so that I can actually bring the priorities to policy making that make the most sense for where I'm at in this role, the constituents that I look to and they look to me, and we can move these pieces forward. I hope this group exercise is useful Kathy.
Kimmy, if I could add also,
Yes.
that if we took this document and look at the last item on the document, which is enhance city facilities and services to maintain high quality of life, that actually never appeared on when you all went through your top 12. And we wanted to make sure that the community knew maintenance of just city services, that's basic. We're going to do, that's our bread and butter. Let's just make sure that, that that's just a blanket statement. That's our bread and butter. We need to do that. But we are trying to figure out if there was something above, way above and beyond, right? These kind of basic city services. If we got nothing done in the next year or two, what would be the things that you think we ought to be really laser focused on? Ultimately, that's what we need from you all at the end of the day.
Here you're talking about this existing list. We're not to the
That's
part with
correct.
the add
We're
things
not
to the list.
to the list
Right.
that you all added some things yesterday. You talked about definitely reparations. We talked about, again, homeless and houselessness, and I think that we can do that under quality and affordable housing. So that's where we need to get to at the end of the day.
Yeah, we're basically reverse engineering from where we already are in policy making, what pieces are already moving, getting everybody into that same space of talking and thinking and observing and knowledge sharing, with the idea to add your pieces at the end. So that is the focus. Not that the end means it doesn't matter. The end is like, now we're layering in to see what actually can be accomplished. Because that's the goal, is you don't just want to set the policy and get priorities. You want to actually know that it can be accomplished.
So as we look at the last one, I think this is the great, for me, a big example of where, under the quality affordable housing, the two items that are on the goals, promote affordable housing with existing city property, we have a policy now, so we're working on that. And promote development of new affordable housing. So we have several tools in place that we talked about. But what I heard you all say yesterday, and what there's been conversation at HCD around, is this: you all may want to come up and say, we did this one, let's take it off. But now we want to focus on houselessness, or we want to focus on who are we targeting with affordable housing, like what group, what AMI level. So you may want to modify the goal around that to say, we're doing a pretty good job. We've accomplished a lot under these, but now we want to get more into the target audience or the specific item. So this would be an opportunity for you to say, yeah, you can take this one off, but add on this one, this one, this one. So I think that's going to be walking through each of these, saying what we've done, marking off, and adding.
Yeah, and I just want to re-clarify, it's not marking off as if it's not going to continue.
Yeah.
It's the idea of, okay, this is satisfactory in terms of being operationalized, and in terms of where we're placing our policy priority, we are going to put something else in that spot. Okay.
How does that feel?
Feels great.
Good. And thanks for all the input on the break on how we could actually really turn this into like an actual group exercise and then to a table exercise. So do you guys want to continue to do them together, or is this sufficient where you're comfortable going to the table exercise? Where you're going to do it again for the next one, right? So the example here is...
the only thing I'm worried about is how you all are going to resolve the different tables. You got that? You're okay with that? You feel like...
I'm good with it because one of the things I heard you say yesterday was you wanted to be able to get a little bit more in the knowledge kind of area of sourcing knowledge, sourcing information, figuring out where the priorities lie so that you can emphasize where the policy for yourself and the constituents go. So we'll consolidate that. Again, this doesn't have to be a long process. You'll do the next one by yourself. We'll give you a timer on that, and then we'll come back together, harvest, and do the last one together. How does that sound?
Well, Kimmy, let me ask you a question, just
Sure.
to see if I understand, because I do well with examples. So say under affordable housing and equity and diverse community, I said, we should have a goal of having the development work go to more Black women developers. How would I change or add or just modify to the current way of doing things to get that goal across?
Great. So currently, the goal that's listed is eliminate racial disparities in the school system, which is this piece. So then it would be about like adding another goal. That would be your desire, is to change policy in this particular area. You'd be looking to add a goal.
So I'm thinking we need to do this as a group.
Sure.
I think this is going to be really hard since we don't seem to totally understand what
Yeah,
we're doing.
it's okay.
Or it just
The messy middle.
Yeah, we're definitely, and if I'm understanding this stage, we're beginning with a base here of these 13 priorities, and we're either saying check, operationalize, or keep it the same, keep going, or tweak to add a component to it, like you just said.
Yes.
So, to me, the other layer of this is that we need some kind of consensus around it. So I think it's hard to do if we're broken into small groups to understand whether there's any consensus around that.
Sure.
Because if you're in a group of 2 or 3, it could be one person said.
That's fine by me. I was going to save it for debate later, but we can totally switch it up again.
But I don't want to
specialize.
yeah, I mean, you
I
guys, whatever.
specialize in adaptation, agility, and the messy middle. I'm very strong in it, so no sweat off my back.
And I would agree with Esther because also it seems like, we're trying to gather information, and the people who know, I mean, it may be Richard, it may be Peggy, it may be Deborah,
Right.
and they can't be at every table.
Yeah.
So I think
I'm all for it.
I mean, I'd be happy to do it consolidated.
That's great.
Together.
Great. Consensus on that? Yes. Kim, did you want to say something?
If we're gonna adapt, can we adapt another layer and do like a circle forward and just make sure we hear everyone's voice? If it's not, maybe it's a pass, just make sure we check in. Because as a larger group, it's hard to make sure that even if you're the only one who wants one priority, that it's really heard. And I think that we might have a better success if we make sure we do a round, either at the beginning or end.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think it goes back to building that trust, that team trust that everyone talked about yesterday. So yeah, let's just do it. Let's get grimy with it in a good way, right? So Kathy, I'll ask for your support. And then of course, whichever other staff members have the key components to like what has happened in those areas. So in terms of this, I don't want to use the word tranched because I'm personally adverse to it, but in this converged category, and now hearing what has already been done and seeing it on the page, Antoinette, you gave us just an example. Was that literal, or was that just like a wild example?
Well, in my mind, it's not wild.
Okay.
Maybe it's going to the utopia that Shanika spoke about yesterday.
I like it.
But also, as far as affordable housing, a greater focus on AMI levels, say 60 or below.
Hey, so how is this all being documented? Is it going to be right there, real time?
We're going to do a real-time version, and Kelly is capturing everything
And she's also typing things.
digitally.
Okay.
So
Right.
this is going to be wholly imperfect, and the finished will be similar to what you received from yesterday.
So
Is that accurate, Kelly? I don't want to
I
speak
put
for
my
you.
glasses on now, I can see that sheet over there. So we're under equitable and diverse community, and then these subsets. Okay, so world's your oyster under these these four
So
categories.
I just want to thank you for that. Antoinette, I want to ask, did we get this correct? And you're seeing this as a goal? Okay.
Clarifying question.
yeah, I have a-
Are we on housing? Are you saying that's an economic?
Yeah, so the larger picture is equity and diversity, and then under there, you see where she had something about affordable housing. and
Okay.
And so I was layering.
Gotcha.
So I apologize in advance for anyone who's already been around for a while, but so on the 60% AMI, there was already an adopted policy by council that for city-owned property, we would leverage affordable housing at 60% of AMI. So that's already in operation, but are you saying if like a private developer wants an affordable housing grant for a private development on non-city-owned property?
Sorry, also thinking of, and this isn't in here, the whole policy of minority and women-owned businesses, so that we can search those people out, provide a pipeline so that when the opportunity presents itself. So for me, it's not, we need to do this by next year, but that it's always, a pipeline so that 10 years from now, there's a proliferation of more people who look like me doing all kinds of work in all kinds of areas. And
So
become
that's on the
norm.
contractor piece, and I'm just saying on the 60% of AMI
Yeah.
affordable.
So not only the people who live there, but the people who build. So I'm hoping there will be a financial component as well for minority and business-owned, minority-owned business and women-owned business.
To build housing at 60% of AMI? Or, I'm just trying to understand.
Both and either or.
I think that,
And
what
sometimes,
I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Antoinette, you're saying you want to, number one, you want us to make sure we're targeting, we have a policy with city-owned property, but also looking at how we use our Luigi money, home funds, everything else. But then you want the people who are contracted to do that work to be minority and women, Black women-owned contractors to complete the work so that they're getting that business. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes.
Which ties into a few of these areas, but it's just a goal that hasn't been stated. You're amplifying a specific goal. Nicholas, did you? Okay.
I have a question. So, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing my opportunity, because I have things under affordable housing. Is affordable housing going to have its own list, or are we now putting it under here?
We're putting it under here.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you have something under affordable housing that would.
now's the
Okay.
time.
Then I have.
but again, this isn't the ad list, this is the, looking at the third, right? I'm just trying to,
Oh,
I'm
we're-
like,
So,
you're
so-
killing me on the
Okay,
process.
very good.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the law of the farm. Let's do things in a sequence. Right now, we want to look at the 13 from this list and together make a decision around what can come off the priority list because we can operationalize it versus what still, in your view, needs to remain on this list of focused priorities. Before we add, let's stay on this, see if we can get completion on our point of view collectively on these 13.
Because ultimately, that's what it's going to take to add more goals, is to determine which goals have been to some level of completion or operationalization so that there isn't the strain on capacity and you can't deliver. The idea is to be able to deliver it.
Okay, so laser focus on this list. What continues to stay on the list, or what do you feel like can be put into the operationalized bucket? We're going to stay focused right there. We will get to the new ad list, I promise.
Okay. For quality affordable housing, I think that we have achieved the first one. We have developed a strategy for sale or lease of city-owned land to incentivize housing development. Check. Great job.
Reaction to that?
There's a problem. We know this, right? Like, we just sold city-owned land, and then now we're like, I don't know, that I'm having a little bit of a tricky time with what happens when we sell city-owned land that was taken during urban renewal and redlining.
I absolutely hear that. As far as what's on this list, maybe that's a new items. And as far as what's on this list, great job, staff. You took our biggest high-impact sites, you took the random parcels throughout the city, you made a plan for them, you put them out to RFP, we had movement, check.
So this is what's so great about this process. This is actually why today was my day to facilitate, even though I know it's uncomfortable for folks, because it's not for some of us in the room, it's very easy to say this has been done, checked. For others, there's more questions and saying like, but how do we solve this? And that is part of developing your collective team trust process, right? The process is the communication. It's saying like, yeah, this is checked off. Well, wait a minute. Is it really? So maybe the question is to staff, is it checked off if I raise the question of properties taken through urban renewal? Is it still checked off? And if it's not, then perhaps it gets added. And again, this isn't my process to decide this is how you should do it. It's to give you a process to work with, to say this actually feels like I'm being snowballed right past and we're just going to the next thing, or I have several more questions. I need more information to decide if this is complete. That was the big harvest that I heard from you yesterday.
In my, again, linear brain, we have processed the land that we own. I absolutely appreciate and respect Kim's point, and I think for me it falls under a different bucket of how we distribute revenue or receive assets, et cetera. So to me, that's in a new realm of how are we looking at things and the resources we have with this equity lens all the time. But this, for me, is we had a finite amount of land that was developable. We queued them up, we deployed it, and therefore, on this task list, I get a check.
So a question, are those the metrics? Just asking because it's for the group. Deployment, to doing the thing that you said you're gonna do, and all the pieces of identification, collection, assess, deploy. Is that an agreed metric for checking this off? And if so, is there something that you feel like wasn't undone or wasn't done?
I think it's going to be hard to do a one-size-fits-all metric on these, but kudos for trying.
Right, but,
yeah, some
my
kind of
but my
standard.
point is to build consensus and to build the pieces of debate that you're asking for. We could go through and run through this list and say, these are the priorities and we're finished, but it doesn't actually incorporate all the pieces you said. So if we get to one priority today that's checked off and finished, that is huge if we're incorporating debate, consensus, trust, and all the other pieces that were really highly valuable.
I'm just a little confused.
Yes.
And the reason why, I understand Sage's position where she says that those items, a strategy for dealing with those properties have already been in place. And then I'm confused as far as Kim is basically saying that we should go after other properties that were affected during urban renewal, and the city should actually figure out ways to bring those under the umbrella. And then we need a process for that. Is that what you're saying, Kim?
Well, yeah, I know that I don't need to be the one to lead on this. However, what I'm hearing from community is when we took money from the sale of land that we know was taken during urban renewal and redlining, which we still don't yet have that urban renewal program area map identified, and that we know that what was lost was place that wasn't just housing but also businesses. We just watched this process where we didn't necessarily. I'm worried we won't meet our goals if we don't replace this with something else about the urban renewal program area map.
So
That's where I would say.
So
maybe
I
it's
hear
an
you use the
addition.
word replace. So to create a distinction, is this checked off because there's a replacement, which does both?
I'm not, so the example you just cited didn't involve housing. So this strategy for sale and lease of city-owned land, technically we have a policy. It happened, we have a policy, but I think what we already know that we're gonna need to do this year is come up with a policy around land owned by the city, acquired through urban renewal, and a disposition policy regarding those lands. I assume that's gonna be on our added to,
Right.
are we?
I agree with that.
I kind of figured we
But
would
if we said
be.
if we ended today and said, city staff, please go use city-owned land and develop a plan for them, they would be like, we already did that. Now, to the end result of where those fundings from the proceeds of said land went, to me is an entirely different point and a different lens. But this is almost
Well,
like
it's not if it's city-owned land and it overlaps with housing, but that doesn't mean, it just means I'm writing down, when you say that, I'm writing down on my new, like what we got to add when we get to the add part, disposition of urban renewal land.
That's right.
I'm writing that down.
That's right, Mayor.
Same.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on the right path. And I think, Sage, what you just said is, we have accomplished and are making movement and momentum on this other issue. We've made enough progress that it probably doesn't have to be a priority, because we're continuing. What you just said, though, Kim, in terms of urban renewal land and the mayor disposition policy, that probably is a priority. That's an additional thing that we need to do, if you all feel that it's a priority.
I want to add a little bit more clarity, just from like where my heart is and what I'm hearing from my community. If we don't acknowledge that some of the city-owned land, when we talk about what's developable, what we have left that was taken during urban renewal is harder to develop. It's more expensive to develop. But we haven't yet had the Reparations Commission say like what repair looks like. And we might have to be prepared to come with a greater offering than just what was left from urban renewal. We might have to come with a serious commitment of city-owned land to replace some of what was lost.
This is like an amazing clash of Myers-Briggs personalities. What you're talking about is very, spot on. It's pretty abstract. And so, here, the staff's literally like, what is my pencil to paper to-do list? What are my marching orders? And I don't disagree with what you...
Don't just give up all the city-owned land, because we don't know what repair looks like yet. So don't be like, you're done, just go do what this does. Because what we do, when we do what we do best, we cause harm.
So your operationalized version of this would be develop a new strategy for sale or lease of city-owned land that looks to retain land acquired through urban renewal and separate it out for disposition, a consideration under urban renewal acquired land.
And I think it goes a little bit further than that too, because I feel like I'm in between. And I lead by example. I learn by example. So let's say the two properties that we had that were urban renewal, but they're no longer available. And when I said, we can take back perhaps 319 Biltmore, could there be a policy around what to do in instances where the urban renewal land is no longer available, whether it is land banking or whatever, a policy that says, okay, we'll take the forward lot back to replace the other two pieces. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too of like equal or greater value. So if we have city-owned land that's of equal or greater value to what was lost in urban renewal that isn't still available, then we should be ready to pause and shift. And 319 is a great example.
So this is awesome, great conversation. We'll never get through today if we do this on each of these. So what will happen is we will say, we need a policy about what to do with city-owned land that we acquired through urban renewal. And then eventually the time will come where we get that before us and we have drafts and we're given input. Maybe we do a work session, there's iterations, and we debate it. But for Kimmy's purposes today, she needs to know, like, is this topic on the list or is it not on the list?
I feel like we...
And process, at least in the first one, I think is very important because it sets a tone and trajectory on when Kimmy's gone and you will continue through, right? So I think hearing some of this through, I think is really good for determining how we're thinking through checking off and adding to when I'm gone.
So it seems to me the direction of the conversation leads me to believe that we cannot check this off. Because what I'm hearing is that we don't know the quality of the land, the urban renewal land, but what we do know about the land that we're planning forward is that it's shovel-ready. So that means that it is of quality, it is buildable land, so let's leave the conversation open in case there is a decision made by the commission that says, hey, the land that we've mapped is of poor quality, so we want to do a trade-off. What Kim was saying, we want something of higher value that the community can actually leverage to be able to do some of that repair around home ownership and business ownership.
So I think it's really interesting because as a facilitator, I'm hearing several things. I'm hearing the question Sandra asked yesterday on what is reparations and how do we define that? I'm hearing the question of, is this done as we called it before? You know, like the past definition of increase affordable housing stock, is that checked off completely? Or is there more to do about that particular line item in that way? Or is there an extension that now we're adding another piece to it, or a new goal altogether? So I think in the decision-making process, this is where the discussion has happened. I think it's really robust discussion. And now it's like, is this done or is it not done because of what has been discussed?
It's sounding to me like it's not done, so I'll stop saying check.
I bet nothing's going to get checked today.
I want to, I do want to, if I may, so is this the time to suggest a new one?
No.
Or we're just, okay.
No. I love it. You guys are like ready. You're ready for let's go to do these things. And remember, half the room, or a little less than half the room, is filled with staff who is about the how we execute on these goals, and how do we deliver and get them done. So for completion's sake for them, we do need to figure out how to check some of these off before we add to. And that's all I'm saying and offering today. If you can't get to that, that is, you know, there's more process piece to happen, more knowledge decentralization to happen. At the same time, I'm still going to ask for it. So if this one's too challenging, let's go to another one. We can circle back, right? So small minority businesses. So specifically what that says under, let's see. This one was...
Under thriving local economy, develop
Thank you.
a business
I knew it was
inclusion
further down. I'm
program.
like, it's not at the top. Right, so that's under the thriving local economy. So is it complete? Is there more to be done? Richard has a little bit more information on that. Do you need more information to determine?
We're at the beginning process of implementing the business inclusion policy, so there's still more work to be done on that one for sure.
More to be done.
You have,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The program is implemented, it's up and running, but we're at the very beginning of it, and so but there's still a lot of leg room to fully implement the program. And I will notice, noted twice on here, it's under an equitable and diverse community, and it's also listed again below the thriving local economy.
So for example's sake, we have developed a strategy. However, we may come back and later on, now we would like to monitor its success.
Correct.
Yes. Yes, see how this process is supporting shared knowledge? Okay, so what we're saying is, so it started, that was the goal and the strategy. The goal was to start, the strategy was to implement that start of it. Has that been accomplished? What was set out to be done? Is it done? Yes?
It
I'm
has
seeing
been
lots
developed.
of yeses.
It has been developed.
It has been developed?
And Richard, is the one under equitable and diverse community, develop and implement a strategy based on the NLC report to foster economic mobility? You're saying that's
Same thing.
duplicative, you're saying?
So I'd be great with being able to check it off, but I think, Kimmy, you also said, you know, are the resources in place?
Yes.
So we've started it. Do we have the resources in place where you feel like in 6 months, you're going to be able to come back and go, yep, it's rocking and rolling? if you don't have the resources in place, then I think it has to stay on our priority list. It's like you've gotten 3/4 of the way through. So I guess I'm just, before we check, which I'm loving the checking, that's what I would ask from a staff perspective.
So the resource piece is missing, and Tony might be able to help me with it if there he is the certification process. I know we're looking for funding at one point to provide the certification process for the
Richard,
business
can you
inclusion.
talk into the mic?
Yes, sorry. I'm looking at Tony at the same time.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out if we have the resources for the certification process for the business inclusion program.
Yeah, I think that we have, this is Kathy, I think that we have, because Richard and I work together on this one because it's in community and economic development, the implementation side. So what we feel like is we will need additional resources, as in people, to help get the certifications done, monitor the certifications, follow up with businesses, do that kind of work. Right now, there's one person that y'all have met, Rosanna Mulkey, and she does that work. So we do feel like we need additional help to be able to make that program successful. Does that answer the question?
So what I'm hearing you say, it's not fully operationalized, and there needs to be some more internal pieces implemented before it is fully operationalized.
Yes, so what I would suggest is we tweak that and just say, we've kind of done the implement, we've come up with the policy, so now it should say funded, fund that. But we don't have to develop the policy anymore. We have that, we think we know what we need to implement it. It's just a matter of, do we have the funding for it?
So again, our new.
So you've kind of halfway checked it.
Yeah,
Right.
we're revising this, because I think we really, and you should get credit for, you've developed the policy. Check. Now it's implementation. Now it's execution.
So in addition to what Gwen was saying about funding, is it resource and implementation and then measure outcomes?
Those
Could
would
we
be our-
add, like shift it?
Those become our new items, perhaps. So what I'm hearing is we're keeping this category as a priority. We are checking off the year of work that went into development, and we are moving into a new priority of funding and monitoring.
Yeah, that's a new one.
But I don't think we're to the new yet, so I'm
That's right.
trying not to do the new.
You're right.
So you're doing great. So keep in mind that you need space on this list for your new stuff. So as you work through this is the tough decision part.
Yeah, the hard
Have we
work.
gotten it to a point where we can take it off of the priority list, put it into the operationalized list, clearing up space for a new priority that you're going to get to later today? So we definitely are looking for space.
Can I offer something to take off the list?
Well, I want to say something to what you just said, and yes, Kim. So I really like that you were succinct with resource implementation monitor. I'm going to twist it just a little bit to say, when you're in resource, let's resource this. That's in the policy piece, right? Like, let's put the work, the energy, the policy making around this. Staff goes into implementation mode. When it's been implemented, you're to decide what that level of implementation needs to be, right? It's this far along, it's whatever. Then you can look at it as like, okay, monitor is about operationalizing it, which lives still in the staff's hands, and maybe reporting goes back to you on how that's being monitored. But this is where we really want to be in the checkbox today is policy making, what has happened with it, how far along have we gotten in the policy making piece, and can we take this off the list? Because the policy has been established, the staff has put it in motion, right? And now we're just working out how far along down the road it's already, in the works. Is that useful? Okay, Kim, yes. Are you sure? Okay. So, you ready to try one more time? Yes? Okay. I'm going to start with the hard one. Eliminate racial disparities. We're just going to go down the list. Eliminate racial disparities in school. And then the strategy for that was youth partnership with United Way. Is it still in policy mode? Is staff implemented? Is it at monitoring?
So it's just been presented in a framework of a proposed implementation strategy.
So it's in
So
policy
it's more
mode.
gelled than conceptual. It's moved into proposed implementation.
Okay.
Is that right? Would you
So
say that?
still policy work to do.
Still policy work to do, however, the partnership has been created. So again, funding, resource, monitor later, perhaps new initiatives around it, but this one item has been created.
So actually,
We
then
haven't
are you saying you can
we
check it
haven't
off?
signed up. We haven't signed it. We haven't
We haven't
entered
signed it,
into
it's
the
coming
partnership.
soon, I guess,
So
yeah.
I don't think we can check it yet because it's still kind of like, we've seen a concept, but we haven't. Deborah, you tell us what you think about how this should be staged here.
I actually think that this is going to be tricky for us, but the expand partnership opportunities with Asheville City Schools through the Equity Collaborative is kind of done, and done in the sense that it kind of faded away. So that's a check. So you're adding probably a new one if this is going to continue to be an emphasis of the council in terms of a priority. So the actual, the way that we're doing it, right, has changed. So
Okay, so give us some wording on this.
So are you saying that the strategy, which is how it gets implemented, has changed? So the policy piece is done, but the actual implementation is being modified?
Yes. It's not through the Equity Collaborative. It's going to be through many other initiatives like pods and a number of other things.
The strategy.
The goal hasn't changed. It's
That's
how the
correct.
strategy
Right.
is working.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a huge distinction, which is why the decentralized knowledge is very important. So it helps you think about, okay, so if we go back to it and you heard what you just heard, and ask the questions you asked, is it completed?
Here's how I'm struggling, because when you say eliminate racial disparities, can we check that? Absolutely not. But when I see it on the list as expand a partnership opportunity with Asheville City Schools through a collaborative, then I can say, yes, we did that. However, it did not eliminate racial disparities. So the goal for me remains, this strategy is checked.
Right,
Whether
so when we think about who implements, right, that's the city staff. This black writing here is done. We've checked that off. We're saying that the goal itself is still in iteration. Is that true? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think the youth, that partnership agreement has been.
Hasn't? Okay,
I
we'll
mean-
circle that.
No, because, I mean, we haven't signed up yet.
Okay,
And to me, the devil may be in the details on
It
that
is.
one.
That's great.
And so,
so we'll keep it. So it sounds like there's still more to do is there more to do on the policy side, or is
No,
it on the
goal-
implementation?
When you say the policy side, I assume you mean the goal
Yes.
column.
The goal
So the
column.
goal column, unless anybody disagrees, I assume we'd want to keep. I think the strategy needs to be wordsmithed to match what's actually happened instead, because this specifically mentions this equity collaborative. That is not exactly what's happening. What's happening is under.
What's the next one?
What's the
Small
next
and,
one?
huh?
What's the next one?
Small and minority businesses. So we're going back to that one for a second because I just want to go in sequence. So someone said earlier that was funded. So in terms of policymaking, Richard, you talked about the policy being done and the implementation is still a work in progress. So policy done, the strategy doing, maybe phase 2. I don't know, is that true? Phase 2, phase 3?
It sounds like that will be the monitoring, I guess, of what we do once the program is fully up and running.
Great. Do you guys want to give me some input on that? I'm not here to say what it is, I'm just offering.
No, I wonder if, I think for conversation and discussion purposes, we could elaborate on all of these, and I wonder if it might be easier to say, is there anything on this list, like to Kim's point, that we could go ahead and suggest removing instead of going one by one? Because I'm sensing from the group that the various stages that these strategies are in are likely to not eliminate much of the list, but if there are some that we know to be completed and can have consensus on that, maybe that's an easier.
I'm all for that. I just want to make sure everybody's moving together wherever their knowledge base is and understanding so that we're not leaving anyone behind. So if everybody's clear, let's go into elimination. We couldn't do that quite a little bit earlier. But is everyone ready to do that now and just say what you want to eliminate?
I'm
Awesome.
kind of curious what Kim was going to suggest as eliminating.
Well, I'm kind of curious about what I'm going to say about eliminating. Okay, so bear with me on this because I'll try not to be too artsy-fartsy, but I think the one that we should eliminate is the next to last one where it says identify opportunities to develop new tax revenue. So here's what I know. We submitted our first delegation request in the 5 years, and we asked for legislation that would allow us to have a local tax for transit. So we've already kind of could check that off the list. And we should pause because I don't think this is a time for taxes other than that, other than like changing the TDA tax or we're getting ready to get $26 million in taxes. And I would suggest that we eliminate that one so that we can put reparations there. Like reparations has to be on this list, right? So if we
Well,
not just
I don't
like
understand
remove it,
what you
but
mean by
pause.
that, since you voted against the creation of the reparations fund. So, I think taxes may be a way of contributing to that fund.
Okay.
So just to be clear, I think y'all have moved beyond this list, right? Now, you're talking about stuff that's not on this list now.
In that particular bucket.
It's not in this.
Right,
bucket.
it was
So
the
I'm
only, it was
wondering-
one that I looked, when I looked at this multiple times, I was like, this one can go if we need to make space.
Okay.
But I'm hearing that
We
may
just
not
want to
be-
write it down and not have it in the wrong place.
I can appreciate that intent, Kim, because we did submit the legislative agenda, so that we suggested the hotel and lodging tax be changed. We suggested and asked for the 25-cent transit localized. The one thing that's jumping out here that may or may not have been resolved and may be tempered for the pandemic is what we had been talking about, the food and bev tax that was on the table previous to the pandemic. I'm in no way suggesting we instate that right now, but to staff's list of things that was on them. So I could see us pulling this for this year. Absolutely.
Any other comments on this particular one to remove?
I don't want to disclude what Councilwoman Mosley just said. So if the tax is the only way you were thinking of that, I would retract that. I just don't know that, like what Evanston did is used a medical marijuana tax or something. And I don't know that we have that right or option in North Carolina. If Councilwoman Mosley is suggesting there might be a tax, I'm not sure.
Council, would it be possible to consider a referendum idea for a creation of?
Interesting.
Or that could fund the reparations fund? Is that within our powers?
Could you repeat that one more time, just so I could hear it all?
What I'm thinking of is just like, we vote on bond ideas, different referendum. Is it permissible to have on the ballot whether our community would be amenable to a tax that helps fund a reparations fund?
So,
with the understanding that the reparations fund is not based on race. Yeah. It is based on policy decisions, the taking of land, and not based on race.
So I see our interim CFO is perking up back there with the notion of this coming up, and I'd certainly invite him to include his input as well. What I would start this conversation, the answer being that, generally speaking, our power to tax is defined at the state level, and what kinds of tax we are authorized to impose upon the community are also defined at the state level. How we then use those tax dollars is a much broader range of options. So perhaps I think the discussion is less about imposing a tax on the front end and more about using the tax dollars that we currently have. And generally speaking, the majority of our tax dollars right now are coming from property taxes. We certainly get sales tax, but all of those are empowered through the state allowance for a certain amount of taxable options. So I would say that generally the Evanston is not something that really North Carolina provides us a ton of authority currently to do, a very specific tax like that. But we certainly have these taxable broad categories right now where the use of those funds could be reallocated.
And
Thumbs up from Tony, so I assume he doesn't want to add anything.
Antoinette, and Kim, I see you. Did you have, I can't tell. Okay, thank you.
so, since it was named that I did vote against the hotels that included a reparations, I will say that I couldn't vote on something that would create more harm. But I would support a referendum, and we have a lot of resources in our community. We've been asked to divest from what isn't working and is causing harm so that we can invest in community. So can we freeze vacancies in our police department so that we can use some of those resources differently? I've asked if we can look at increased property taxes from existing hotels to go to a reparations fund. But I don't know if pursuing new taxes is, maybe that's what it comes off and it becomes like pursue funding of reparations. That to me would make sense.
So that's not a remove, that's a new. That's a different page. Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to remove? Right now, we're just going to go with removing because that is the theme right now.
I would say, is she talking? I'm okay with removing it for this year because people already are struggling and have hardship. So, that to me just exacerbates a problem that we already have.
Removing the new tax revenue. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Sandra?
Yeah, I'm just saying for now.
For this year.
Yeah, in
Well-
light of the current situation we find
So
the
to give
community in.
to give this some context, this wasn't talking about property taxes. This idea was around the room tax, which all goes to the TDA, and trying to retool that, which legislation is being proposed to increase the room tax fund that's available for the city to apply for from 1/4 of the room tax to 1/3. The other was a transit sales tax earmarked for transit. That legislation is being introduced, not likely to go anywhere, but it's being introduced. And then at the time, we were talking about things like a food and beverage tax, which we don't have in Asheville. How to harness tax revenue from visitors rather than locals. That was the gist of this conversation and why this is all on this list. So I want to be really careful about saying, we're not raising property taxes because we haven't, I don't know if we are going to raise property taxes. We're in a revaluation year, so a lot's going to happen with this budget cycle. We have a proposal to pay staff raises, and there's a lot that we need to digest on this. But this was more, when you look at the buckets of revenue for a city like Asheville, you got property taxes, you got sales tax, you got utility fees and other fees. Did we want to expand that? Did we want to try to figure out if we could harness other monies for these, for our buckets? But
Thanks for actually bringing that knowledge into the room. I'm sure most everyone here knew that, but I did not. So I don't know if that changes anything in terms of how we're looking at removing or not removing. I don't know, but that knowledge piece could have changed some perspective.
And again, if it's not necessarily using terminology of removing, like we're not going to pay attention to it, it will not be the highest thing that we think about on a daily basis in terms of putting staff resources into this particular strategy. So I want to make sure that again, you all don't think we're just saying, we're not going to ever pay attention to that. If opportunity not, we will, but what we're trying to get to is literally, if there are 3 or 4 things that we've all hands on deck, because again, think about number 13, we're still going to do what we do every day, deliver services. But if there is something that you all are saying, you need to deliver this, Deborah, in the next year or 2 years, period. Because these are our priorities, and this is what you've got to deliver. So if we thought, if we said we wanted to look at something that might be able to come off, like complete corridor studies for identified transit corridors, I think we're well on our way doing that. So our focus can shift. It's not a priority. We'll continue to do those things, but it will not be staff's priority. It will be what we do, enhance city facilities and services. It will become just what we do on a daily basis. It won't be that the big bang that I think you all want to deliver to the community. That's.
And one of the ways I want to name it is yesterday with the chart that one team had up, Nicholas was reviewing, he had you identify the 3 things, whether it was like strongest or weakest at. And I was in the back of the room and I was taking a lot of notes and listening. And the one person, and this isn't to say it out loud, is it okay if I say this, Deborah? Because I mentioned to her last night before I left. The one thing I noticed that she said that it was so different than everybody else is she wants exceptional results. And so if I just put that in the room for like how the city manager delivers back to council, our city manager wants to deliver exceptional results on council priorities, which have to be highly specific and drilled down to like, this is what we want you to focus on. So the process, I'm loving this process. I know it's frustrating to be in process, but what it does is it gets us really clear about, okay, if we had to seriously say, these are the 4 things, what are those things can we agree on? And maybe we won't agree on all of them today, but we know that it's our job to get there. And that's the goal. And so I'm like, I love the messy middle. It's so frustrating to people, but I'm good at it. So just let's keep going. Did you want to say something? I see that mic ready to go.
Nope, I think that's it. You're working, sometimes it helps to begin with the end in mind. The end in mind is, we'll just target this. You're going to have 3 high priorities that you agree to, that you're going to hand over to your city manager, and she with her team, they're going to work on a plan to come back to you and say, here's how we're going to deliver on your 3. So you've got a long list now. You've got priorities in your pocket that you're going to take out today and say, here's what I think the priority should be. You're going to get 3. So you're working through this. So elimination is the language. I think the language is a bit off. It's not eliminate. It's shift.
Yeah.
To operationalize and monitor, normalize, which clears up space for your big 3. So just know that's where we're going. You get big 3.
So I want to again suggest we eliminate the identify opportunities to develop new tax revenue. And I say that knowing that when we get to the new items, I'm going to be over here with Councilwoman Mosley saying we need new funding for this other item. But
well, and
in the interest
again, that was, those required legislation, so it wasn't a,
I'm not necessarily suggesting a tax, we were
How about we do it this way, Sage, in the interest, just as it says, identify opportunities to fund transit, we can remove from taxes and say, identify opportunities to fund the reparations fund. Identify
Is it
those
me, or are we going to
strengths.
likely have a reparations? Are we all on that page? We're going to have some movement on reparations today, right?
I don't know if we're all on that page.
I hope we are. But and I think when we get to that, then this is where we'll have those strategies, right? Because I think you're right on. Like, identifying that strategy for funding, fill in the blank that we're focused on, is probably enough for me to say, let's check this one.
Let's check it and get unstuck, because I feel like we're stuck. So can we agree to check it off? And we're checking to identify opportunities to develop new tax revenue.
So that is
Job done.
that is a shift the focus off of that and into something else. Come on, y'all, you're getting it done. What? Yes. Listen, I celebrate the 5-minute wins every day in my life. So you may
What
not
was
be
it?
that way, but
What's the
5-minute
other
wins are a
one?
big deal.
To identify opportunities to develop new tax revenue. You said 2. Was there another one? Oh, just that one? Okay.
So how
So
about,
we didn't hear from the team here, the consensus here on the completing the corridors studies. Is that a shift away from that? Yes.
So is the ongoing study, corridor studies, going to result in a zoning overlay? Is that your anticipation, the process that's happening right now?
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Well, okay, urban centers, yeah, that's ongoing, but in terms of, I think you mentioned Tunnel Road and Hendersonville. I mean, were you thinking those are going to result in zoning overlays, the proposed zoning overlays like we've done for downtown, like we've done for the River District, or no?
I mean, they could, but I'm not certain that they are.
Well, okay, I mean,
do you feel that the studies are complete for the corridors? No. Okay.
They're underway.
Okay, so they're not complete.
But I changed this from remove to operationalize and
but they're on,
monitor.
so yeah, this is our challenge because we're hesitant to check it until it's done, but you guys are encouraging us to check it because it's happening.
Because
Yes.
we're in
And
the middle of it. We
Right.
can't, yeah.
Yes. That clarification that we keep bringing up every time we go through this process is part of the process. So I love it. Thank you.
So
Are we talking about the one that says amend the UDO or the one that says identified transit corridors? Which one were you thinking about?
I was looking, I thought it was number 4 on the list, complete
you're saying-
corridor studies and other plans identified for transit corridors.
Transit corridor, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And we are having this conversation at the MPO level too. So I mean, this is Kim, it's in process.
That's right.
And to that point, to Deborah's point, I think you just said, so this isn't something we're coming to you and saying, hey, we have this new idea. Go find our
That's right.
corridors. So to that extent, it is now operationalized and off the, hey, this is a new goal list.
Is this a priority for us?
Right.
It's what we're doing. We're in the process of doing.
Right.
So your predecessor council identified that as something that had to happen. That boat was loaded up. That ship is now sailing toward the place that they said it needs to go.
Right.
Which means you don't have to launch another ship. It's on its way. So we're going to let that go. Staff is driving it. It's all good. Now that clears up space for your next priority. That this group is saying, we've got to launch this ship because there's no ship right now. So that one, to me, feels very much like it can transition to operationalize and monitor, which means this staff's going to come to you and say, hey, we want to give you an update on how that's going, where the ship is. But that one, to me, feels like it's definitely ready to shift. Operationalize, monitor. Now we've got space. Let's keep finding space.
I love it.
The ship
Okay.
analogy is helping me as well, thank you.
Yes, ship girls. Daughter of a civil engineer and architect on ships.
Question for Councilwoman Roney, because I consider you our transit wisdom person. Implementation of phase 1, not complete.
It is definitely not complete because we don't have the service hours, but I would suggest that we shift this to fiscal year 1 and 2. South Asheville residents on the S3 and S6 corridor don't have frequency that makes it possible for them to rely on the bus. So the way that I was going to approach this one, and thank you for asking, is that we actually could just go ahead and do this and anticipate a checkoff next year. Like, let's set up some easy wins. But put fiscal year 1 and 2.
You're talking about phase 1 or?
Phase 1 is where we are still lingering on the evening service hours. So 30% of our bus routes end at or before 7:30. Let's get them going to 10 o'clock and then increase the service to South Asheville with the fiscal year 2. That's the S3 and the S6 corridor. We are totally capable of doing this. Right now, we've been running the Young's bus behind the S3. If we were running our own bus, we would maybe not need that resource to be going to a different organization. We could be focusing on the jobs that we provide and the service we provide.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is
Sure.
that happening because of the COVID limitations? And if it weren't because of the COVID limitations, would it be different?
Well, we might not have the backup of people waiting behind on the S3 if it was running twice as often.
Okay.
And so
So-
fiscal year 2, is it running twice as often?
Okay. Thank you.
And I'd like to say too, and what she's saying about those routes, they are definitely something that's needed because and the thing is, I was just wondering, anybody have any idea the cost involved to make these changes or put in these changes that Kim speaks of?
I don't have them on the top of my head, but we have seen those presented.
Okay, and like she said, if it's anything that we can sort of just check the box, that would be something that's gone. And
I'm hearing that this one stays on the list. This one is
So,
incomplete.
so my question about this list is, it says phase 1, is that year 1? Is that the same as year 1? Phase means year on this thing?
Is we could operationalize and monitor this if we do these two things, which is finish phase 1, which is year 1, in the plan, and then complete phase 2, which is the extension of those lines.
In year
Yes.
2?
That's fiscal year 2, yes.
Yep.
And that's what the community is advocating for. We're getting emails about it.
Yeah.
So we could just set, like I was saying, like set up some like fastballs down the middle, jump shots, whatever it is. We're going to win this one. We just have to do it.
Well, and, you know, the
And it was
only,
our top
the only
priority.
reason we ever don't do it, because it is a priority, is because of money. I mean, that's the only reason, well, and management contract issues and that sort of thing. But, I mean, the basic reason has been money. I mean, that's really, that's the only, council, there's been motivation. So I suspect we're going to have a little bit of a complex financial situation that staff's going to need to sort out because we did get the COVID relief funds, or we're about to get COVID relief funds from Congress, which may address some of the second bus issues and those sorts of things. So I'm assuming that you guys will have to kind of crunch the numbers and figure out how much we can use of those funds to help offset the costs as we phase it in versus how much are going to be our recurring costs year after year that we're loading on to our general fund budget. Right, okay.
And
So-
then next year at the retreat, we'll be hearing about hopefully a county transit master plan and the French Broad NPO is doing a regional transit study. So we will have follow-ups later. I just think this one is so close. It was our top priority and we can totally do this.
So thank you for that. That was really, really powerful in terms of like just moving it forward. I think we want that kind of momentum and setting the pace for that. I also want to name that, keep in mind with some things that you offered yesterday, the ability for pushing some things forward because they're your top priorities, pulling back on some things because they're already operationalized, and other people having priorities too, that we want to balance that together in our trust building and communication. So I think that's great. Deborah, did you want to add anything to that?
No,
or?
you're good.
Okay.
So just for clarity, can I ask if we are developing a list of operationalize and monitor? And so just to be clear, we've talked about these, now we've talked about this. I think the other one is the Business Inclusion Office. I think we've operationalized it and are monitoring that.
So Kathy, wait, hold on, before you move on to the next topic, I think Shanika had a question about, are we checking the box here? I mean,
Did we
so, I mean,
check
it does make kind of wonder, because we do have this whole plan in play, I mean, we have the plan. And, so what do we do when we don't need to develop a plan, we have the plan, it's a funding, we need to fund it,
So
and that's.
the same here. So I'll put dollars beside of it, so there is council action for funding on this one as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And so
It's
under
almost
the
like we
business
need new
inclusion-
columns, like we need
An
funding column
operationalized.
and,
Yep.
like, keep doing it column.
Yep, resource, implement, monitor, whatever other version you want, but I think that's great, is to add the columns so that you don't keep going back to, wait a minute, which stage is that in? Where are we at in this process? Business inclusion, you said, Kathy?
Also operationalized, yeah. So I'm hearing that we are, for purposes of this list, checking it and moving it to operationalize.
I don't know that yet. I think that's what I wanted to get to before.
This is the implementation of phase one. Almost feels like a reword, almost, it's like a continue to focus, fund, et cetera. It hasn't gone away as a priority, but we do know what phase one is. We do know what it needs. It has been developed. Implementation and operationalizing it seems to be the next task.
Yeah, so consensus, just to get clear, Kim, I'm hearing you say it's shifting out of the priority policy piece because it's already been done, and it's really about the implementation and monitoring. So for city staff purposes, they're not prioritizing that, they are just getting it done.
Okay, so because it was a top priority, and I still believe it is very much a top priority, if we remove it from this priority list, will it get done?
Yes.
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 And we are going to do year 1 and 2, because in my mind, if we were going to leave it on here, we're going to put year 1 and 2, and we check it off next year.
Well, the only reason we couldn't say that is only because of money.
Yeah.
Because we haven't done the budget yet. Assuming we can afford it, that would be the only inhibitor I would think there
Right.
would
So
be.
I think it should stay on, and we check it off next year. But if it's going to move to actually getting done, then it can go.
Yeah.
This is a trust moment, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying, look, I can see it. Can I trust that it's going to get done? This is a trust moment. You are still responsible for the ship call that particular item. You still own it. We're just taking it off of the priority list, putting it into, hey, let's execute on it. And you get to hold the city accountable to that. That's critically important to do.
It's
Hold them accountable. So at any point in time, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, where are we on execution of that? So this is really important.
Which is the knowledge and communication and the decentral, that's the activity piece that goes beyond the policy making. And this, what we're really wanting to anchor in this retreat is the policy making piece. What's your priorities in policy making? That policy has been set, and you're correct, it is not operationalized fully because the funding isn't there, but it doesn't mean that it goes away. It's just now no longer a policy, like the whole city staff has to run and make this their top thing. They're operationalizing it and finding the money to get it done in S3 and S6.
Do y'all remember yesterday we talked about active trust? So I want to actively trust that staff will continue to work on this and execute phase one. I also think I can actively trust Councilwoman Roney to make sure that happens and to keep us posted. I don't think we'll leave this room today and this thing fall by the wayside. And I want to actively trust in both of those.
Question. Is there a way that some of the items that needs to be monitorized, that we could put in policy to say that those ones, the ones that we have already identified, that need to be done but hadn't been funded, that we could institute policies that will put time constraints that had to be implemented before, prior to. So that way we wouldn't be dealing with this if we had a policy to deal with when these items would be funded. So when we do the budget, those items that are listed are top on the priority.
So we're not on the screen on my PowerPoint anymore, or maybe we are, but that is actually like towards the end of this day, is putting all the timelines in so that you walk away with a completed, these are the priorities, this is the capacity, funding questions, whatever, and here's city staff, you have to come back and not only give us the strategies for implementation, but this timeline piece, we are saying like, hey, this goes with this. So it's not an incomplete cycle, it's just we're working through the process of getting to the timeline.
Okay.
To me, you don't have priorities if you don't have a timeline, and a fiscal year is good, but in terms of implementation and boots on the ground, it's good to see that progress along the way.
Okay, so you're doing good because you're in a rhythm. Things that your predecessor body decided were priorities, they got built, they got launched, and now they're on their way to being implemented, standardized, operationalized, and monitor. Do you still own that? You own all of those. You're clearing space so that you can birth new priorities that are really important to you all in the community current state. Now imagine, this is why this is so important to get good at this. Imagine what this is going to look like 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. You're going to have ships all over the place. Yep, we started that, look at it go. We started that, look at it go. So this letting go, let it go forward, and the staff has it in their hands and continues to be accountable to you to give you updates on it, is really important. But it's vital that you let it go, trust, actively trust, so that you can birth the next list. That's coming.
Jamie, do we have any highlighters that?
I have tons.
Oh, okay, I need
Tons of
wow,
highlighters.
She does have a lot of highlighters. Okay.
What do you need?
So I'm just looking over this list, and it seems like there's only a couple of things we haven't talked about.
I have a suggestion for the next one.
Let me just close. I'm just closing the. Is this helpful? I mean, I don't want to.
Please, this is your meeting. I'm just
Okay.
literally here to facilitate.
You mentioned the reduced municipal carbon footprint by 4%, and to the point about the trust, it's very unsatisfying that the only thing under clean and healthy environment is this one little box, because actually the city does a lot more, and this is a little bit of a challenging area because it's sort of integrated into a lot of the things the city does, and it's thread through different departments. But it's true that this is operationalized. I mean, this particular thing is operationalized, so you could check it. So, and maybe make room or make space, as it were, to put something new when we do the new part in the clean and healthy environment.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, again, I mean, not to say, of course this will continue, but I'm wondering if we're going to want a chance to add some new things there, and so technically this could be checked.
Agreement, thoughts, disagreements, debate?
I could hear that, especially because we need to make space for food security.
Ding.
I'm in agreement.
That's good. We're going to let that shit roll.
Love it.
Okay, so I got, the other one I see that we didn't talk about yet is the develop specific implementation plan and schedule to amend the UDO and ordinances to reflect recommendations in the comp plan. So I think when we did this, we were thinking about our urban centers, weren't we thinking about that? And we were thinking about the hotel ordinance. What else were we thinking?
We were thinking that the UDO is 20-something years old.
Well, the whole UDO, yes. Now, I mean, that's a little like saying, I want to eat healthy, so I live to be 90. I mean, it's a long term. I mean, it's so huge and amazingly large. And actually, the reason I'm saying that is the only inhibitor to doing it really is that it costs so much money and takes so much staff time that we haven't been able to accommodate it.
Agreed.
But I'm the first to stand in line and say we need to redo the UDO. But what would this be? What does this mean now this year?
Yeah, I think you're right, Esther. That's what it was for when we were discussing the urban centers, because in planning and zoning, that was pretty much top on the agenda until we had to, in the hotel overlay. So that does address those issues.
So do we hear a ding?
Ding.
Ding?
Ding, and to bring up a point that you made earlier, it's a ding and Sage, and to your point, Sandra, as well, are those also being kind of operationalized in some of the other commissions? Is that part of what their work is? This is just to add to your columns of how you're thinking through process.
The overlay has been pretty much decided, and the urban centers, has that been pulled or delayed, or what's going on with the urban?
So it's in process, right, Deborah? The urban centers is still going.
Okay.
It's not stopped.
Okay.
Or it better not be stopped.
It is coming back to City Council June 8th.
So it's a little bit random what gets on this list and what doesn't. I mean, can't you think of like massive amounts of things that aren't even on this list? Like we don't have the revamping of the noise ordinance on here, which is like a never-ending saga of trying to read. But I'm just, So it's a little bit funny of a list, but it's so great to check things off, though, isn't it?
And I think that, say, for example, Mayor, that the noise ordinance came, I think it came out of sequence in terms of your council retreat and your priorities. I mean, it just came up, and you all said, staff, work on that. And so we went and worked on it.
When we said that, we thought it was going to be relatively easy.
Well, please. What ordinance change is relatively
Now you have an
easy?
example of what the weight is for making changes.
But Madam Mayor, you're sharing something that's really important. What I hear going on is you're now beginning to create discipline and rigor about this list. Understanding that you have a countless number of things that you're responsible for, and staff is going to keep driving forward. This list has to be reserved for the most important new priorities that you're trying to launch. And those two will come off the list and transition and operationalize. But you have to have rigor with this list. If you don't have rigor with the list, you wake up one day, you get 40 on it, which means none of them are really a priority and completely unmanageable by the staff. The only way you can hold this staff team accountable is you're really clear with you say, these three, don't miss on these. That's vital. So rigor and discipline.
Yeah, and I'm also hearing two things from different folks. So I'm hearing, gosh, could it be that we need something that looks more comprehensive in nature, added column, something so we're keeping a full kind of breadth of a track of things? Not that we're going to be doing it, managing it in terms of in the weeds, but from a policy standpoint. So these are things that you actually can come up and out of this meeting and say, you know, that was great, but we're missing this and this and this and this for me to make an informed decision and me to be able to say that this priority represents my constituents. So that's not, we're not going to handle that now, but I'm offering that as homework, you know, as when you're up and out of here, that's work you take with you, because it isn't comprehensive in the way we've delivered it, with the idea that you're a new council for the most part, and you're going to add those things that make your decision-making simpler.
Anything else to take off the list?
I have one. There's one maybe.
Sage?
Unless I missed that conversation. Number 10, participate in the Buncombe County TDA Management and Planning Initiative. This is the TMIP process. And city staff put forth a series of recommendations, committees and commissions and boards all reviewed, and then the TMIP fell apart. However, it is, ding. It is at the state that it is. I believe they're going to revisit it perhaps next year, and that this year what we're focusing on maybe is this legislative change around allocation. So this for me is a ding.
More dings? Any more dings?
Ding with me. No dings.
We can have a dong.
Ding.
Ding dong.
Ding.
Did we talk about identify opportunities to fund transit service via dedicated revenue stream? We did.
Well, we said that we put forth the legislative
Well,
agenda request.
Yeah, I mean, there have been
I
other
hear that
concepts.
question, and I really think, speaking with staff and looking at the numbers and riding the bus for years and sharing the work with the MPO, we really need to work with the county. We're providing service into the county. The county doesn't have to start from scratch with their own transit master plan, because they can glean from the work that we've done. And it's an area where we can collaborate and partner and get better results if we work together than if we just stay in our own silo on this. I think we'll ultimately have much better success with the county tax for this if we work together with the county on it. If it's for everybody in Buncombe County and the people of Asheville are in Buncombe County, we'll have better success. So I would say ding and plan on it being a future work.
What is the name of it again? Can you read that?
To that point, I kind of think under our goals here, we might actually add a goal when we get to the new part that talks about exploring further partnerships with the county in general. I think we've advanced our relationship with the county. We have great working relationships at a management level, and so it might include transit funding. It might include collaboration around school initiatives. It might include reimagining public safety partnerships. So, to me, I think that's right.
And we've identified them. The identified definitely has a ding on it.
Very good. More dings?
Okay, you're right, we did miss the one. Did we miss any others?
I think that's it, and I think we, by way of constant operations, removed the last one, right? To Deborah's point that they always do this. Please don't make it.
Deborah added that, so you.
Oh,
Nicole,
did I hear, I may have heard that wrong, but.
I think you're right. This is unconditional. We have to do the item 13, the last one.
So then, I'm not sure if I kept this list properly, but what I see are items 1 and 2 to be amended, operationalized, reworded. And I see number 7, the review and update comprehensive housing affordability strategy, as still unchecked. And everything else on my list is checked. Did anybody else get all that?
From a process standpoint, are you guys going to kind of pull all this together and then
We can do it through lunch.
through lunch, and then you're going to kind of run us through?
And then we'll have it ready for you, and we'll have a different list that takes all the dings off.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that cool?
they're just what
Yeah.
remains.
I just
So-
figured.
Did we need to discuss number 7, review and update comprehensive housing affordability strategy?
I'm busy numbering these, so I can.
I know,
figure
it
out
did
what
help to number
you're
them,
on.
but that one is halfway down, largest paragraph. I'm just not sure that we discussed it, or maybe it was folded into the others.
I think we didn't discuss it. I think we went into the ding mode. And if you want to, before we break, speak to it, that'd be great. And then that way, during lunch, we have a more clear picture of everything that was on the list.
Thinking from the work we have done, we updated policies to prioritize income ranges, including lower AMI. When we did task some of this out, it's a very broad statement. So I'm hesitant to ding it, but it could be a wordsmithing operationalized in my mind.
Give me some words.
Staff, can you remind me what this is the review and update comprehensive housing affordability strategy with the goal of assessing the effectiveness of the tools and encouraging development of mixed income communities. I thought that was, we were just gonna try to see if our policies were working or not, and if whether they needed to be
It pushed us
amended.
to do Luigi again and update it, and that was done.
And then it became Luigi.
And then it also, we amended the housing trust fund language a couple times. So there were some policies that were updated to reflect the goal of achieving mixed income and reaching lower AMIs. If that's what the intention was of the 2019 council, then I say we can ding it, and then when we get back to new items, I'll share my other things.
What was that? Is that right? Gwen? Is that what it was?
I think that's what it was, and also, I feel like, this assessment of how effective our policies are, I feel like that's become operationalized. I feel like just HCD is doing it all the time, and I think staff is doing it all the time, that, it isn't, that we have operationalized the continual review of how effective the policies are, and they're always looking for, are there different things we could be doing around it?
Yeah, and I would certainly echo that, Gwen, as well as if you have the presentation on slide 12, what we tried to do was to demonstrate under the accomplishments that your policy about 60% AMI targeting that group, how we were actually accomplishing those things and testing out Luigi, home funding, housing trust fund, all of those things in order to address the specific AMI that you wanted us to address. We're having housing affordability workshops for you every year to bring you up to date. We brought in, I guess the first year in 19, a group of folks who said, here are some items you need to work on. Like one of those was some changes in zoning. Like we have pure single-family zoning classifications. Those are things that are on our work program. We're getting to them. Just time.
It sounds right to me, because I remember in 2019 thinking, maybe the end of 2018, that Luigi had been around for a number of years and had not yet once been used, and now it has. So good job, staff.
Great job. Okay, so we've covered them. Wordsmithing, elimination. All right. That's great work. And you thought you wouldn't get through it. You did. You checked some things off. And when we come back from lunch, we're going to do some switching around during lunch. We get some things together so that you can add to. And we can relook at these buckets on where they go now, so that your priorities are kind of grouped together and you're looking at evaluating with a process that you continue to iterate with. So ready for some lunch, folks? Is it here? Is it time? Feels like it's about that time. Anybody have the time?
It's 11:40.
We have about 20 minutes. Is the lunch here?
20 minutes?
No,
Okay.
I mean, I'm all for eating
Yeah.
lunch.
I'm not sure if it's here yet.
Okay. It's not here yet.
So good, so we've got 20 minutes, so maybe this is the time for us to go ahead and create a new list.
Yep.
And you get to take all your priorities out of your pocket, and let's get them on a board, and let's look at them. This is a policy priority. We have to launch this, because we have to take your individual version of that and create a group version of that, and then we have, again, new decisions to make. So I think we use the time, go
Yes.
ahead and get your new stuff on the board.
And I know you have lists, so do you want to go in a particular order? Do you just want to popcorn like you've been popcorning? Some folks are quiet, some folks are speaking up.
New list. We better let Sage go, or she
No,
could
I'm going to
spontaneously
actually,
combust
I'll
over
sit
here.
quiet for a minute, because I know that I can talk a lot, and I'm just getting hungry.
So you had one that you put up here already. Do we need to transfer it over so we don't lose it?
Yeah.
Kathy, you need to speak in the microphone. Don't
sorry.
forget we're live streaming.
Here, I'll do that part if you want to.
There was one that in the conversation that I think was pretty clear, identify funding for reparations. And I just didn't want to lose that one. So is that one that is new?
Ding.
Ding, ding, yes, 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 yes.
And Kelly is coming. You all also identified some new things yesterday that we'd like to transfer as well.
Oh, that came up in the,
One was compensation for city employees.
Right.
I don't know how you recalled that one first, Kathy.
I see Scott looking at me over there. That's what both chiefs looking at me.
So here's my question on the reparations, when we talk about a reparations fund. I mean, we did establish one with the hotel ordinance. So, but we've also laid out this process that's going to take a couple of years, and in that process, it's forecasted that a commission will identify what reparations looks like. Is it a pot of money? Is it land? Is it both? Is it policy changes? Is it all of the above? So I feel like with reparations, there's such a focus and eagerness that we keep, in my mind, getting the cart before the horse, but maybe that's fine. Like, I'm kind of looking at Antoinette, 'cause I know, and that's fine. I just, like, every time it comes up, I'm like, okay, is that how it's gonna look? Like, are we finally gonna get a commission one day and be like, well, we just got excited, and so already here's what it is. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm flexible on this entirely, and we're making our own way, but, so I just raised the question.
Well, I think that, of course, funding,
setting up streams of funding for reparations. I think that should be the top priority even before getting any kind of commission together, because you're able to set up streams where you know what kind of money is coming in that can be spent. So therefore, when you do actually get the commission up, then they'll know what kind of income stream they have to prepare,
Okay.
the different, does that make sense?
So what if we were to say, and I've had some preliminary conversations with the county about this, but what if we were to say, okay, our goal for reparations funding is $1 million, just hypothetical, this is a hypothetical, is $1 million a year for the next 10 years. And if we get funding through hotel applications, that would count towards it, the cash dollars. If it comes from here, but if there's a shortage, we have a line item in the budget that makes up the difference every year. I'm just trying to get my arms around so we know when it's a check mark, did we do it or?
I don't think you're going to be able to check that box.
Well, again, keeping in mind, we have to tell the staff to do a thing. So what is it I understand.
I think, like you said, I think the idea of setting up income streams to start going into a pot, that makes sense, before all this other stuff get worked out, because, and as far as checking a box, it can't really be checked. And that's the reason it's good that with the hotel overlay, this money would still be coming in from different things. And I think that that's the way we should look at it. And that way we can sort of figure out which way it's going. Because right now, if you want to wait till we get everything set up before we have income coming in, then you'll have everything set up, and then people will be like, well, why are they not doing anything? Well, they don't have any money. So it's like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, well, and that's why I raised the question of what does reparations look like? Does reparations look like a pot of money, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? We have a policy that every year the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has a line item in the budget, and it is funded, $2 million a year, every year. So there's a pot.
I would hope to see a line item in the budget for reparations and the fund.
Yeah.
I don't see them as being mutually exclusive.
Good. I'm just asking the question, can we gel this up so I know what the thing is that we're doing, so I know if we did it?
So for now, I like the way we're using the 20 minutes. I think to get you where you want to be at the end of the day,
keep it abstract. You want to keep it.
I know it's challenging because as much as it's so much faster to go linear and just quick to the goal, it's a zigzag. So I just right now want to stick with the things that are important to you to add, and then the debate, discussion, timelines.
I have a question. The point list that we applied for hotel use, we talked about whether or not that could be applied to all development. Like if someone wants to build a Trader Joe's, or would they need I shouldn't have named a grocery store, but I'm just saying a housing development that has expensive condos. Can we apply that same point system so that's also contributing to the reparations fund?
I would say yes. At some point, yes. We do want to have a community benefits table for every land use.
Thank you. That's the language I was looking for.
Sure.
Across all conditional zoning, perhaps, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what else? We have 3 so far. What are the other priorities?
Well, if that's the case, and we are thinking about that, should that be a new priority? Should implementing
community benefits,
a community benefits table for all conditional uses, is that a new goal?
Ding. Very good.
And that way it kind of.
Very good.
They're not conditional.
They're working in collaboration, similar to the buckets that you're setting up. So there's a kind of a circular economy going on in each of the buckets.
It might be that the goal is a little bit like, how do we incorporate community benefits into zoning and land use in general? Because if it only captures conditional zoning applications, of course, everyone will try to figure out how to do it by right. But the concept is clear. The concept of we could figure out the details.
Beautiful.
So I have a sneaking suspicion that implementing the COVID relief money we're receiving is going to, we're all sitting here talking about other stuff, but it's going to consume like a ton of time this year, and it should. It's a considerable amount of money, and there are requirements about how quickly it has to be spent and what it has to be spent on. So, in terms of a new item, and in the short term, I would say implementing the COVID relief, spending, investment, whatever you want to call it, we need to recognize that that is going to be a priority. It just has to be a priority. Now, how we as a council interact with that process, I don't know, but.
And can we add equitably to that priority of implementation of the COVID relief funds?
Yeah, I'm not sure how deep we're going into these items, but I had a similar prioritizing recovery, and I had that as 4 items under it to understand and itemize the impacts, to
So do you wanna flip
prioritize the most
page, Kathy?
impacted, to
You
deploy
said
the-
prioritizing recovery, so this kind of, are you saying this would live within the implement the COVID
And I may be
piece?
too in the weeds at this point. I'm not suggesting we write it down just yet. I was saying, I just
Okay.
had some parameters around like deploying it with immediacy, understanding who is most impacted, ensuring there's a just and prioritized use for the funds for those most impacted. And then I also thought maybe because of the county and this idea of the partnership, and they have an additional funding, that perhaps a task force, I'm not saying a board, a task force might be organized to assess and come back with recommendations.
So yeah, I like what you're saying, Sage. I think it's in the weeds, like you mentioned, in terms of how do you implement those, that core piece that was mentioned earlier. That's the implementation piece, which is part of, I think, what between the council and staff. I mean, that staff needs to come back with a plan, and if that's part of what you want considered in the plan, then it's a little different kind of bucket, but
So stay up here.
stay up high. That's what we want you guys to be at, that policy level.
Okay.
Thanks,
I have
Kathy.
one. It was brought up earlier, urban renewal land disposition policy.
Urban renewal, land disposition policy. Yes, you did say that earlier. Thank you. Oh,
They brought it up, but it was one of my
Yes.
top.
we are doing well here. What more?
Under housing, I had shelter as a basic right, adopting a housing first model. This is coming back to the unhoused and homeless and
Houseless. Yeah. Did you get that, Kathy? Housing first, housing is a basic right. Mhm. Do you want us to say more about that? And, okay.
You got to say a little more so we know what you're.
I'm so sorry that I'm taking so much mic time, so I'm trying to, be quiet. But yeah, so under housing, I have a lot, so I'm trying to stay up here.
So for the purpose of distinction, let's close out this. Does anyone want to add anything new to the list before we just unpack this piece of where the high level is and then where it starts to trickle into, you're using the word and so I can't think of another one, I apologize,
but the weeds.
Anyone want to add anything else?
I have,
Yes.
this is Kim. Participatory budgeting, we've been doing some research on that. I think that could probably go under community engagement and add engagement ambassadors, because I know that that's addressing some disparities in equity and who has access to input. And Durham has models we can look at for that.
How do you want us to write that? Engagement, add engagement ambassadors?
Participatory budgeting and engagement ambassadors.
Got it. Thank you.
We're just doing our spitballing.
Yes.
We're going to figure out our consensus around
Yes.
these. Okay.
I'd like to throw out increasing the percentage of residents that own their homes.
Is that increased home ownership?
Increasing home ownership.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this. Yes, Kim?
I think we have to, when I thought about the resiliency and sustainability, resilient and equitable food systems. I think the city can participate with this with our land use, with cooperatives, with gardens. But we have food disparities that are in a lot of places that used to have a lot of Black-owned businesses. So I think that we need to address resilient food systems.
Did you say resilient and equitable? Yeah, it's just, yeah, thanks, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. Food systems. Thank you.
I have one that is challenging to put into words, and I would seek advice from everyone else in the room, but I have a lingering concern around our land use and running out of land. So I'm trying to put into words how we could assess. You know, for me, this comes back to density around corridors and access and single-family zoning, and you know, but we're going to run out of land, and part of that is we're seeing that in the uptick in prices, and therefore lack of affordability. So, understanding the limits of our land use, I'm not sure how to put this into words, but can you all understand my intent? Like, how do we understand what we have left? Land use as a resource. I'm not wording it right, and maybe over lunch I'll think about that.
Deborah, do you have?
So when you said that, it got me thinking about the focus areas. Based on what you said, where would what you're saying live?
I suppose a well-planned and livable community, financially resilient city, environment. I mean, it touches everything, frankly. If we continue to build.
Say again, what are you're looking to do, like an inventory of all the land in Asheville and how much of it is buildable for housing?
I don't know that it's that detailed. I am concerned that we, on one hand, say we need so much housing, and then on the other hand, the entire community says not here, not there, not near me. And I want to encourage us in some way to educate around how much land we have, that it's a finite resource, that density is needed. I don't know how to put this into...
You want us to go from NIMBY to YIMBY.
That's what exactly what I was thinking.
I may have YIMBY on my paper, but I was afraid to say it. But just the education component and really understanding, because if we continue to develop at the rate we are now, things will only get more expensive, and we will run out of land, and then we will be stuck. So how do we begin to assess that?
Is it fair to say, like, assess land absorption, land availability, or, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so where does that, I hear what you're saying, and we want to capture it. I don't know where it'll.
Perhaps I can think about it over lunch.
Okay. Great. Let me look at the time, see if you guys have any closing thoughts for this part of the segment, and then when we come back, we're going to dig into putting all of this together. Then you can see what you've removed, what's getting added back in, saying where it goes, and really focusing on the policy piece and the timelines.
If we said our thing yesterday, does it count? We don't have to say it again.
That's what Kelly is
Kelly.
recapture.
I can't see Kelly, but I imagine
Kelly
she's
has
behind
captured
that.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you are. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
You moved. Can't tell what these masks do anyways. Okay, so if we said it yesterday, you got it? Okay.
Okay.
I do have a question. So the strategy you suggested yesterday was the collaboration with the county around the 911 dispatch, right?
Right,
Kind of lives under Imagine.
under the
Reimagine.
Reimagining Public Safety.
Yeah,
it was a
so
big
I did
reimagining.
have a thought about our immediate direction this year, because last year, I mean, we had a plan, and the theme or the goal was divest, invest. So I just wanted to. I don't have a strategy, but I wanted something to follow that under the theme of divest, invest, because it was very specific. The divestment strategy to have a return in Black community with resources and programs. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I don't recall you saying that yesterday, so I think.
No, I didn't say it yesterday, but I know
Do we need to capture it?
reimagine was the top
Under
priority.
Esther's, okay.
Yeah, and I know that's what Esther was vibing on.
Okay.
Because that was all a part of that initial conversation that we had last year during the budget session. So I wanted to just kind of pin the theme, divest, invest.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have.
Oh, and then to also lift under that, and I don't mean to complicate, I just want to get it out, and you all put it where you want to put it. But I want to decentralize the focus on APD. I think we made a commitment to support this strategy by looking at all departments.
Thank you for adding that. Okay, just looking across the room very quickly, seeing if anybody has anything that they want to add to the table before we take that stretch break, call break, email break, food break. Okay, I'll see you back at 12:30. We're exactly at noon. I lied, 12:45. 12:45.